Hi, everyone. Welcome to Communication Leadership Connects 2026, an event organized by University of Washington's Communication Leadership Master's Program. I'm Ekin Yashin. That said program's director and faculty member, and I'm joined by my colleague, Anita Verna Crofts. Anita, how are you?
I am so well, Akin. It is wonderful to see you. It is wonderful to be here again, co-facilitating with you. Here we go, Connect 2026.
Exactly. And for those who are joining us today, this is an intentional learning event for all professionals, particularly in the space of communication, content, and design fields. These are broad fields that are directly impacted by the topic that we're discussing today. We've been actually thinking and talking a lot about in our program impact of technologies to practice for many, many years, but
Yes.
particularly with the topic of artificial intelligence. We've been actually dealing and exploring this topic and how it impacts our world of work, and how we can make sense of it as educators for a while now. Anita, I think it was about 7 years ago now that we organized an in-person version of this event. Now we have live streamed, of course, because to reach globally, but and we started exploring this topic a while ago, right?
That's absolutely true. I think to think back that 8 years ago, we were convening a group to discuss AI. And I think that as you and I have reflected on what it was like 8 years ago to today, really seeing the conversation move from what felt like the bleeding edge and almost the abstraction of it to now each one of us is so impacted in different ways, whether it's in our work, the way that we move in the world. And so the conversation today is going to look very different than it did 8 years ago. But I think what's extraordinary is that our program has been able to engage these kinds of conversations around these emerging technologies and adapt the kind of conversations we have based on the impact that they're having in that time frame.
Exactly. And, to make sense of this complexity, I think, to your point, we've been trying to cultivate learning spaces where we can co create responses. So today is
That's
very
right.
much designed like a learning experience we have in our
Yes.
master's program. We're a very intentional community. We're talking about intentional AI. So, those of you who are joining us live, I've seen a comment. I know that we have. Different audience members from all around the world. Please participate and engage with us throughout this session. This is for your learning. So don't imagine this as just a live broadcast where we think through an idea and you just listen, but we're going to have multiple ways for you to interact. And maybe just as we preview, Anita and I are again educators in the field thinking about AI, but also thinking about intentionality in work practice across domains for many years. Today's topic is about thinking also about how our work is reimagined. All our speakers
Mhm.
will address that. But Anita, I wanted to just share with you a couple kind of data points that are,
Please
I think,
do.
really important for us all to remember. And we also have a mini syllabus that we'll share with you shortly that has all the links to all the different types of things that we're talking about. The information I'll share right now, the data is also linked there. It's just like a class session. So, a recent Gallup poll from this summer shared that 27% of white collar employees reported that they frequently use AI at work. That's a 10%
Mhm.
increase over the course of a year. And that's really exciting. But only 30% say they have proper guidelines
Right.
installed by their organizations as to how to use it. So I think to me, Anita, that really, that point about, on the one hand, we're using it all the time, these
Yeah.
tools, or starting to use at our workplaces much more frequently, but that we're not maybe having those intentionality conversations is a really striking feedback.
Absolutely. And we know that when any new technology is introduced to a work environment, let's say, um, it's unfortunately a rarity that we get the kind of training that that technology requires. I was actually just having a conversation the other day about how many of us were actually trained on PowerPoint when it became the way to design slide decks for whether it's in our classes or meetings. But I think that the crucial distinction now, and why I know it's so important for the two of us to feel like this is a topic that we wanted to bring these thought leaders around and have this convening today, as we are all in that continuous process of revelation and learning and adaptation, is because today the kind of power that AI has means that if we forego those crucial trainings, there is deep risk. And I think that
Mhm.
being able to move into the conversation today, it's not just that you're designing a PowerPoint that might not be as elegant as some. The risk of not having training, understanding, and a real, as we say, intentional workplace effort to integrate will spell challenges that I think our speakers today are going to discuss in a way that will allow all of us on in this learning experience of Connects to move forward with clear ideas, and I think ways of action to make sure that we move into a more intentional space of adaptation and adoption.
Indeed, right? Again, I just want to drop some insights. Again, all of our learners with us today can read deeper. According to a new 2025 Pew Research Institute survey, actually, as they were trying to understand how workers across sectors feel about AI's prospect and how it will help them reimagine their work, few workers actually think, according to this survey, that AI use in their workplace will improve their job prospects in the long run. And to your
Right.
point, Anita, I think in this moment, learning together, crafting that future together, and creating collective reflections and guidelines matter more than ever. So, this is also why I'm so excited for all of you who are participating today to share your insights with us, to share your
Yes.
experiences with us. One of the exciting parts about learning is to hear those perspectives of experiences in across the world workplaces as we think with these tools, and also reflecting both opportunities and anxieties. To your point, Anita, as well.
Yeah.
Because this is another quote. Anthropic's CEO Dario Amodei in May 2025 said that AI could drive unemployment to 10 to 20% in the next 5 years and wipe out half of all entry level white collar jobs. We're hearing a lot of
Mhm.
such also comments right now. So it's a
Mhm.
moment of, on the one hand, the possibilities with these tools that we'll hear a lot from today's excellent speakers who are going to
Yes.
teach us different ways to imagine. But I also want to acknowledge this anxiety component
Mhm.
too. The discussions right now about reimagining our work with AI across contexts also requires us to kind of address these complexities.
Yes. And I think one of the best antidotes to anxiety is learning. And
Mhm.
that is exactly what we're going to do today. And in fact, in the same spirit of the mini syllabus that you mentioned, and we really craft this in as a learning experience that extends beyond our hours together today online. But in addition to the mini syllabus, we've also got a badge arranged through the University of Washington and LinkedIn. Do you want to mention that, Akin, too?
Yes, of course. So we will also try to instill this learning in the long term. So those of you participating, I know I'm already seeing some comments, and thank you for interacting with us. Keep those reflections, maybe note them down, because after the session today, you can also rewatch a recording, or if you're watching a recording right now, that's also welcome. You'll have until March 20th to submit a short reflection about your learnings today, as we would in a little class assignment. And we're going to grant all those who completed those reflection assignments a badge issued by our program. So that shows that you have created some space. We're thinking about intentional uses of AI, which is again a complex topic. I just saw a comment from one of our participants in the UK. We shared in the comments that only one in six businesses have adopted integrated AI tools in the UK, and the rates of adoption being lower there than that is in the US. So there's also these complexities. But again,
Yeah.
as you're thinking and reflecting, keep thinking and sharing also those reflections in the comments. And in addition to our badge, that which will keep reminding you during this session, and again, in the minute syllabus, there's a link for it. We're also going to engage you through some activities too. So share your perspectives there too. Anita, our production team have created a Miro board throughout the session, and again, the mini syllabus has links to it as well, and we'll share links
Yes,
as well in the comments throughout our live streams. But as you're seeing, we also created ways for you as you're listening to us to share your perspectives in these dedicated spaces as we would in a class. So on the Mira board, we have a broad task for the next 3 hours. Share resources, images, books, ideas, questions in different dedicated spaces, from examples of intentional AI to educational resources to tools to fears and hopes. This Miro board is a way for you all to also interact throughout the session. And we'll keep reminding you too, and to kind of think through all of the different components that we're diving deep throughout the session, and have a keepsake afterwards.
that's right. That's right. This is something that, again, exists beyond our time today. And it's always important. I know as a program, we really do believe in that value of bringing ideas and sharing them together, and so Connects is an extension of that, and we really want it to be an engaging time together. And so between the Miro board and other times during our talks today, there will be opportunities for people to voice opinions, to ask questions, and that's deeply important to us as a part of the ethos of the program.
And this session is, elevated by way of, Anita, your participation. So again, we invite you to be. We will keep inviting you to be active in comments, talk to one another through the Miro board as well as comments. Ask questions there. We'll also have a Mentimeter link later on for you to ask questions too. But we are seeing your comments live in the live stream. Anita and I will curate your questions at the end. We'll have a panel with all our speakers. But talking about our speakers, we are going to make sense of this really important topic about how we make sense of work right now, and how maybe we build intentional AI practices from
Yeah.
multiple perspectives, by way of really exciting four speakers that we have joining us today. I'm really, really excited for us to learn with experts in the field, some of whom are faculty of our program and alumni of our program. Some are long-term partners and people that we're thinking with as well. So our speakers, four speakers today, and we'll introduce them when the time comes in, represent perspectives from content design
Mhm.
fields as well as communication fields, and help us make sense of this intentional AI landscape from a variety of different perspectives. Anita, I want to kind of ask you a little bit about, some themes that these speakers are exploring that you're excited about.
Yeah, one of the things that I think has been great is as you and I were thinking about Connects and starting to imagine what would look like in terms of a speaker roster, it's been exciting to see the kinds of common themes that have emerged across, as you're saying. And so I think there are going to be conversations around the way that we look at being able to verify information that we glean through AI platforms, and that verification and authenticity is going to be a theme that we see threading through a number of the talks today. I would also say that inevitably in conversations around AI and adoption in the workplace, there is a theme of adaptation, and
Mm,
how do we adapt to the kind of relationship that human beings have to these technologies, and the way that we leverage these technologies, for instance, for research. When we as a human being have a question, how do we use AI and then trust that the information we are receiving from AI is not only verifiable, but also has a utility for us because it is based in fact. And so I think that a number of our speakers are going to start to tap into how we move in this new space of verification and what it looks like in utilization of this technology.
indeed. And I know that Madeline in the comments just shared that, a lot of the conversation, as I mentioned too, centers around so much job place replacement, and this
Yes.
human potential that our speakers are talking about how we reimagining our work is, I think, really necessary. right now. So again, this learning, just as a reminder, too, is going to be done throughout the day, and let us share with you the flow of the day as well. Now that
Yes.
you've seen our speakers, it's we're here till 1 o'clock. So we're going to be doing kind of an advanced class with you all. So let's look at what's in the works. So we're right at the start. We're sharing with you a couple, perspectives at the start, and we'll go through again as you're seeing on your screens. Four of our speakers, followed each by a an interaction for your participation. We're going to ask you to answer questions throughout too. So this is a true learning session for the live learners today. That's your benefit, is your input will be integrated, and we'll see your immediate reactions to questions that relate to the speaker's subject matter. At the end, we'll have a Q&A. And Anita, so the Q&A is more on a panel discussion style, right?
That's right. We're instead of doing Q&A after each speaker, what we're really and as you said, there are going to be themes that thread their way through all four of these wonderful talks that you and I have been lucky enough to get sneak peeks on, and so we're excited to have those now be live and shared for you today. So we're going to bring the full panel together because there's something really wonderful about being able to bounce ideas as well. So that will happen at the end of the event.
Indeed. And again, throughout, you're seeing these on the screen, but the mini syllabus is shared
Yeah.
in the live comments. But for those of you, there's also a link there where you can scan if you're watching a recording too. The mini syllabus has, again, to this recorded or live sessions agenda, as well as many resources and more information about each of these talks and our speakers, as well as many more resources there as well. So please share that. And then the last, but again, I just want to give everyone a view of our digital badge too. Anita and I already mentioned that, but quickly, this is what you'll get. And you can display this on LinkedIn or other professional learning places as well. So that's the badge that you'll receive, beautifully designed by our team. And with that, maybe, Anita, let's start with some interaction before we introduce our very first speaker.
I think that'd
Just
be
as a
great.
quick note too for those tuning in, this session is produced by our live streaming class in the master's program by our wonderful students and our faculty member Richard McLean. They're in at UW campus producing this event live, so a big shout out to them for making us look good and making this
Yes.
event so fantastic, and creating these learning opportunities for the community. So, to give you a preview, maybe, Anita, let's bring in some questions that gives us a sense of the event and our audience today. So, we're going to
Wonderful.
use Mentimeter as a platform, and there are links to it, both now you're seeing on your screen as well as in the mini syllabus. So, let's get a quick couple questions to get us started today, so that we can bring in your perspectives and get a sense of who's joining us. So maybe let's start with just getting a sense of who's here. Our very
Right.
first, I know I've heard a couple of you already joining in. So this is the perk of, again, a live session. Join us and share with us and interact
Not
with
too
each other
surprising.
too.
Ooh, Chicago. Look at
Oh,
that.
amazing.
Was not surprised to see Seattle come up right away, but
From a laptop
laptop.
too, that's
Excellent
true.
answer. Very
Eh,
good.
eh,
Very good.
Again, for those of you in Seattle, I'll share at the end a number of events coming up in person for our program too. We want to reach globally with this event, and nationally too. So we have some participants I'm seeing also all around the state, to other states like Alaska,
Oh,
Arkansas,
Anchorage,
Atlanta, Chicago. So many who are
Atlanta.
joining us. Thank you for being here. Portland, Maine,
Thank
Anita's
you so
part-time
much for
home.
being here.
Yes.
Yes.
So we have
Give it
community
up for
from
Portland,
everywhere,
Maine.
and including where we're located in Seattle, as well as many other states and countries who are with us. So I'll wait for 10 or 20 more seconds to get
Mm,
a sense of, for you all to be excited, also to see who you're learning with today.
yes.
Thank you all for being here. I just saw that someone is again
Oh,
joining
I'm
us
joining from
from
the
New
UK.
Hampshire, where I was
Yes.
at New Hampshire this weekend. So hello to everyone. Argentina too. Wow. So this
Happy
is
to
just
see
giving you a
Argentina.
sense of the live and wonderful community that we bring together. And again, in
Yeah.
our program too, we bring together a community from all around the country as well as 21 different countries. So I'm really
Mhm.
glad to see that reflected in the learning session today. So thank you for being with us. I'll just wait for another second, and then we'll move on to next quick question. That kind of gives us, Anita. So this is something you and I were discussing earlier too. Um,
Yes.
just, I know it's hard to gauge this as a scale, but we're going to talk in between and through our speakers a lot about intentionality. And we're asking you, how intentional is your AI use, in professional and personal use right now? And we'll wait for about 20, 30 seconds for everyone to chime into this question too.
Yeah.
But I want to invite everyone to also share more in the comments. How is how intentionally would you say, Anita, is your AI use these days?
Yeah, no, in designing these, working with the wonderful students and Richard and the whole team around this event to think about these questions has brought on inevitably self-reflection on my part. And I would answer that in a couple different ways. As you and I, as educators, akin, we, as you know, we are thinking about AI very intentionally because of the way that it relates to learning and the way that it manifests in our classrooms. And so I would say that when it comes to my professional engagement with AI in the context of higher ed, in the context of a graduate program, the kind of task force that we put together 3 years ago to think about the way that we wanted to discuss AI in the context of learning, I would say on that front, it's been
Mm-hmm.
quite intentional, and I've been very pleased with the kind of conversations and thoughtful engagement that we've had. But I know that some of the um, some of the things you mentioned in our reflections at the beginning about the anxiety of how fast the technology is not only changing in and of itself, but also shifting the kind of national and international conversations. That to me feels like an area where I want to be more intentional about self-education, engagement. And so events like this really make a difference to me because it can feel a little bit pell-mell right now.
Indeed. And we're using these tools in so many different ways. Andrea just
Yeah.
shared with us in the comments, from, doing for personal trips to meal planning to many other things, to
Yes.
our actual workflow. We'll talk about research today, communication. And maybe that's a great point to transition to our very first speaker. We're trying
Yes.
to understand this landscape and how to engage with the reality of the kind of uh, space, and maybe think about how we can prepare ourselves and identify spaces of learning. So,
Yeah.
let me begin by introducing our very first speaker. So, throughout the day, we'll talk about intentionality, from behavior change to interaction to future of work to veracity and trust to collaboration and adaptation, many different perspectives. Each of our speakers will bring a unique lens into AI intentionality and how work is being reimagined by way of their actual work. So that's really exciting. We start with a leader who's been really thinking about how AI is shaping communication practice. As someone I'm really glad to have known for now a decade, that ages us. But our very first speaker is Matt Ashworth, who's going to share with us a really exciting research component. So, Matt Ashworth, just for those of you who are tuning in, is a senior vice president of technology at Recommunications, where he helps emerging brands break through crowded media landscapes as leader on the agency's AI advisory group, of course. So he's been actively thinking about organizing events, working with various clients on topics we're exploring today. He works with many clients on practical AI skill building and adoption, helping communication teams use new technologies strategically and responsibly. So again, that intentionality is really at the core of Matt's work. Matt will talk to us about today, Anita, We Communications' new study in collaboration
Yes.
with a peer institution, University of Southern California's Annenberg School of Communications, PR Institute. They've been doing this study for a number of years now. The most recent version examines how communicators are adapting to a zero-click search landscape and the rise of generative engine optimization. We've been talking about search engine optimization for many years now. We're coming into this new landscape of generative engine optimization, which actually changes how brands are found and framed and trusted because of the new landscape of AI driven search. Matt will tell us about why communicators may hold a distinct advantage um, um, in this moment and how they can leverage this new reality at their work. So, without further ado, I want to invite Matt to share with us this next session, his learning and his insights from this report.
Hi, Ken. Hi, Anita.
Hi, Matt. Again, we're so thrilled to learn with you. And before I turn it over to you, I just want to say we really appreciate thinking with you. This is, again, I said almost a decade from my very first year in the
Hi.
program till now. We've collaborated in thinking particularly about emerging technology, role of communicators in this landscape. And you've been such a leader in the field in trying to not just make your organization, but other clients and many organizations around the world and in our region make sense of these complexities. So I'm so glad that our learners today will get to learn with you.
I appreciate it. And it's so great to be back with you. You did make me feel a little bit old when you said it was 7 years ago that we first kind of gathered. I think we were there at the university,
Yeah, you sure
not
were.
really knowing what was coming, not really knowing what
Exactly.
was
And
coming.
now we know, but
And
are we better prepared? Who knows?
well, it's there, as I think a lot of the comments in the chat already attest to. It's
Yeah.
there's a lot of anxiety, like you mentioned, Anita, and
Mhm.
uncertainty. And we all just need to work together to sort of understand the technology and how we can use it in really thoughtful and intentional ways, like you said. So it's exciting to be here with this amazing community, seeing some familiar faces in the chat already, but I'd love to dive in and talk about generative engine optimization.
Great. We're turning it over to you, Matt. We look forward to learning from you.
Great. And I've clicked present. Fantastic. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about a shift that's happening around how and where a brand's reputation is formed. And as you know, more and more people are asking generative AI tools for answers. So a question that every communication professional is going to need to be able to answer is, when someone asks about your organization, what does AI say and where is it getting that information? So this is a really important workflow shift that's happening for our industry and the way we work. So a lot of this does come from our study, but the goal today is really just help you understand what is this notion of generative optimization, what is it, and how should we think about it. So I love the framing here. There's a lot of hype around AI, but this isn't hype, it's reality. AI is becoming the newest battleground of influence. In these large language models, they don't just surface information, they synthesize it together into an answer that people are increasingly trusting and satisfied with. And if your brand isn't showing up accurately and authentically in those AI responses, you're losing control of the narrative. So that just means, as communication professionals, it's increasingly important that we understand how our brands are showing up in these tools so we can use our human judgment to influence those responses with intention. I abhor jargon, as any good communicator should, but this idea of AI visibility didn't exist a couple of years ago, and we're at the very start of this shift. Things will change quickly, but I did want to level set on some of the language that's emerging around this shift and share some terms that it's important for you to know. The first one is GEO, or generative engine optimization, as it can reference, like we've been talking about SEO for years. This is the AI equivalent of that. GEO is just the practice of making it easy for AI tools to find, understand, and cite information about your brands and products, so that those answers that people get are accurate and authoritative. In simple terms, it's just the process of tracking what AI says, understanding what those sources are, and then implementing strategies to influence it. So geo is really the new practice or discipline. Below that is sort of the behavior shift that's powering that. And you'll see a lot of references to zero-click search, which just means that a big share of searches don't end in a click anymore because the answer shows up right there in the interface, either in the AI tool or in a Google or Bing summary. So influence is really moving into that answer layer in those search summaries, in those AI chatbot replies. And Geo's success is about just making sure we have presence and accuracies in that first line of influence that comes through AI. And then LLM visibility is how we measure it. It's basically kind of your AI share of voice. Like, how are we showing up? How do our competitors show up? And is the story that AI telling about us true and accurate? So from terminology, geo is the new discipline. Zero-click search is the behavior change driving the need for it. And LLM visibility is how we measure or track how well we're doing. Okay. Now that we've kind of named the concepts, let's look at some data about how quickly this shift is accelerating. As you probably know, usage is exploding for tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, and Claude. That 10K annual increase stat, I think, is really telling. ChatGPT is the fastest software application to 100 million active users in history. So people are increasingly turning to these tools for information. At the same time, Google and Bing are answering more searches right on the page, providing those AI overviews at the top. And as a result, traditional website traffic is declining because for the most basic inquiries, people often get what they need without clicking through. So I think the takeaway for comms here is that it's not enough anymore to earn great coverage, to publish good content, and to drive good social conversation. We also have to do all those things in ways that make it easier for AI to understand and cite. This shift isn't just changing how people learn either. It's changing how they shop and find products. So I would love to hear in the chat from people. Like, I'm guessing many people have already used Gen AI tools, when they want recommendations. Our data shows us that more than half of consumers already use Gen AI instead of traditional search when they want recommendations. So that just means AI is becoming a front door for consideration. And then, as you can see in the intent data on the right there too, about half of ChatGPT activity is search-like, but it's not just, hey, look this up for me. The biggest slice is what we call generative intent, which means people are asking questions like, what should I buy? What's the best product or service? And what should I choose? So, especially for services, absolutely, Sandy. It's just increasingly becoming sort of that first step to research and information that guides how people learn, that guides how people buy products, etc. So I think the comms implication here is pretty straightforward. When an AI engine recommends a product or a company, it's pulling from the ecosystem that we influence as communicators. Coverage, reviews, third-party validation, owned content, and explainers, and compressing that into a single answer. Surprising to me, for those that are more on the B2B side, study from G2 last year found that it's having a big impact in those B2B buying conversations as well, including how people research, how they shortlist vendors, and even how they make their final purchase decisions. So to kind of summarize what this all means in one sentence, it's that increasingly what large language models know about a brand will be what people know about the brand. Full stop. People are increasingly getting those first impressions from AI tools like ChatGPT, Google AI, Copilot, Perplexity, not necessarily from your homepage, your own content, or even a news story. And when AI is like the front door for our audiences, accuracy and reliability in those answers aren't nice to haves, they're table stakes. So since the way people discover brands is changing, the way we measure communication success needs to evolve as well. And I'm not saying that the old KPIs we're used to don't matter. They still do. People are getting information through all of those traditional ways, and often the AI response sort of pushes people to content. But those measures don't tell the full story when a big part of our audience no longer clicks through to those web pages. So we need a new set of KPIs that reflect what's happening inside that AI answer layer. And you'll see on the right there at the top is share a model. Like I said, that's basically share a voice. How often the engine includes you and your competitors when people ask questions about your category and the types of products and services you offer. Then in the middle there's sort of how we're showing up in the answers. Are we high in the answer? Is the tone right? And most importantly, is it accurately describing who we are and the things that we do? And then finally, there's kind of that downstream behavior. Are we getting referrals from AI experiences? And are those turning into meaningful actions or purchases? Okay. So we've defined geo, we've looked at the behavior shift that's taking place, and we've talked about the need to evolve how we measure. Now let's talk about why this is such a big deal for communications and something that's going to impact how we do our work. So quick proof that this just isn't just our opinion. I can mention the survey we do annually with USC Annenberg on the impact that AI is having on communications. In 2025, we asked a number of questions about geo and AI visibility, and the big takeaways were about what you'd expect. 62% said they believe geo is the biggest opportunity in comms since search, but almost half say if you ask them to review their content for geo today, they wouldn't know the first place to start. So if this feels new or fuzzy or intimidating or causes some of that anxiety that Anita talked about, that's normal. This is a very new discipline that's continuing to evolve. The goal for today is just to make sure everyone has a basic understanding of what this is and specifically how it can be a great asset for communications. So if the question is, where do we start in thinking about geo as an industry, as a discipline, I think the answer is that we start by claiming our lane. And I believe that as a discipline, geo is communications right to own. As you know, historically, SEO has lived with marketing, but geo is different because AI answers are built from a mix of sources that look a lot like the communications ecosystem. So the headline on this slide is that non-paid media accounts for the vast majority of links that AI cites, not paid banner ads, not search keywords. And then in the middle, if you break it down further, that non-paid mix in the middle includes the stuff that we own and have expertise around as communicators, company sites and blogs, reviews sites, landing coverage with news and media outlets. It's basically the open web and all of that content that we work hard to make sure, is accurate and authentic. And then about a quarter of the citations are straight up journalistic sources. So there's a big theme in the conversation emerging about the re-importance of earned media, because AI tools like to have credible earned media sites that have authority to validate what it sees on companies' own pages and in user communities. So again, geo needs communicators, and I very strongly believe that within organizations, the communication teams need to lobby to have a seat at that table and make sure it's not owned solely by, the team that owned SEO, because it's our job to shape messages, to target the right earned influence, and advise on content strategy. And just essentially make sure that all of that content reflects the narrative we want to land and therefore is being pulled through to the AI responses. The other reason this is a really big deal for comms is that geo represents one of the first times we can get direct, measurable influence data. So historically, those of you that have worked in PR know that we've had to rely on more indirect indicators, sometimes to the dismay of CMOs who have other marketing disciplines where they can really quantify the impact. We look at things like clips, sentiment, message pull-through, reach estimates. Those are all useful measures, but they're still sort of proxies. And in the AI answer layer with Geo, we can actually observe the outputs and see who gets cited, which sources the engines prefer, what facts get used, what language shows up, and where any errors creep in. And that, I think, just kind of really levels the playing field with other marketing disciplines that have always had those tighter performance measures. It's just, I know a lot of us that have been thinking deeply about this feel like it's a really big deal that we're now able to generate first-party data on how our narratives and our work are showing up, at least in this AI context, and use that to sharpen what we pitch, what we publish, use that to base strategy on where we should focus our efforts. So tremendous opportunity for comms. And because of that, an ongoing geo strategy is table stakes these days. We're at the very start of understanding AI discoverability in the way that these tools use information, in the way that people use these tools is going to continue to evolve. As you can see here, AI citations differ based on search intent, which is constantly evolving, and the domains that AI is pulling from refresh monthly as LLMs adjust to new search behavior and content partnerships. As one example, right now, we're pushing a lot of clients to focus some of their earned media efforts on Axios because there's a lot of other tier one outlets that the content paywall prevents them from coming into AI. And so if we know that one of their audiences uses one of the AI tools, over indexes there, Axios is a great way to get that third-party validation of our own content. Again, that will change and evolve. So doing like a single audit of how your brand shows up isn't going to be enough. We're going to need to have ongoing tracking so that we can understand how we're showing up across the broad range of things that people will ask AI about. Okay, now let's get practical on what this looks like in practice. Our model that we use at We Communications, we call GeoCompass. It's a simple model in one picture. We start on the left with an audit. That's the baseline. How do you show up today in AI answers? What sources are shaping those responses? Then we translate what we learn into approaches for the three big comms levers we control. Based on what the audit shows us, what can we do differently for earned content, owned content, and in social communities to better train AI and how to tell our story? On the earned side, it's things like identifying which outlets and journalists are consistently getting cited in our category, and that can guide to where we should pitch. On the content side, it's how AI is pulling from our content, and this has been really fascinating as we've worked with clients on this. AI likes information that is easy to read. It likes clear explainer pages, proof points, FAQs, and comparison language. In some categories, I'm seeing people get smart to this and basically publish their own owned content that is, company A versus company B, and comparing them to their competitors and highlighting their differentiation, or publishing things like the best AI development platform for software engineers and putting themselves first and ranking. So there's a lot of people that are starting to understand how AI reads content and trying to game that system. So that's some really interesting insights that a geo audit can provide and let you know how to counteract. And on the social side, it's which platforms and creator ecosystems are influencing the narrative. Like I said, AI likes to look at own content. It likes to validate that with user-generated content and validate that with third-party validation. So we see social sources and communities pulling in quite a bit. Reddit in particular seems to have a really outsized influence. And then over on the right is evaluate. This is where we measure whether the changes we've made based on what we learned about how we show up in AI are actually moving the outputs. Are we showing up more often, in better positions in the answer, and with better sentiment and accuracy? So that's our simple model. Let me show you a little bit more about kind of the nuts and bolts here. So this is the simple mechanics of how a geo analysis works. You need a software provider that can, there are several out there. We tend to use Peak AI and Profound the most. Profound is right now considered the market leader, but we'll continue to see new tools, roll out and get better. But basically the human part, the intention starts in that first phase where we come up with the list of things we want the tool to ask AI. So it's designing and anticipating what people are going to ask about our company, our products, our category, our competitors, our key messages, executives, sort of that set of inquiries that we expect people to ask that we want to know how AI responds to. Pardon me. And we build that set of prompts. We put them into the tool, and the tool asks those prompts repeatedly over a period of time. And it generates a report that shows you where the traffic is being pulled from. You can click all the way through and look at, oh, it was this particular Reddit thread that has an outsized influence in this particular query. It can show you the earned media outlets that are pulling through so that you can, for example, we now, for a lot of events, maybe have our traditional media list, but also have an AI media list. One example is for a client that we supported, we identified that a couple of what they considered tier 3 media outlets were having a really outsized influence in the category. So for their yearly sales conference, we elevated them, gave them the white glove treatment, and asked them to participate and be there. And then 3, once we have that report, we analyze it, and that can really fuel strategy across a lot of different things. I'm going to close here by just saying that we've talked, a lot of the theme around this is around intention. And so when I think about the positive around AI, and one of the things that really is a boon to us as a discipline is that those insights, those things that come from the audits and the smart prompts that we've asked that I just described on the last slide, really do give us one source of data and strategy that can help us prioritize across all of the different things that we need to do as communicators. And it can also give us data points, tangible data points on how that content is performing now that will help us, that basically just gives us the insight we need to build strategy for a wide range of things you see here on the slide. So I hope this has been helpful and just sort of educating folks on what this is, why it's important, and gives some sort of confidence around the ability to have more data as communicators than I think we've ever had before.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Yes, this was so insightful. And actually, as we're talking about reimagination, right, I'm really fascinated by this new thinking around the GEO and its impact on communicators at large and kind of like the references. That's so fascinating. There was a lot of in the chat too. Our participants asking many questions of you, but also
Yes.
thinking about what those sources are and that
Yeah.
proliferation's impact on companies, but then also some hope on, the kind of rise of maybe journalistic work and earned media and that type of more like meat of the PR work, right?
Right.
Coming back because of the insights you shared as well.
Fantastic. Well, I'll look forward to the addressing some of the questions in the Q&A a little bit later.
Thank you so
Terrific.
much, Matt. Thank you. Again, yeah, for those of you who are joining us, we started actively the learning session with Mash Ash Award of We Communications and talking about a really timely topic. And I really found it really insightful. And now maybe let's turn to you and go to the Mentimeter and get your views on some of the themes and questions that Matt was asking about this prominence, right, Anita, about like, I mean, I don't know, this kind of very interesting shift for organizations that they have to take into consideration of if people search online, their searching online habits change through these, different chat agents and AI tools. What happens and what type of preparation they have to do.
Yeah, I mean, so often a professional communicator is in large part a keen observer of human behavior and then adjusting messaging or um, content accordingly. And so I really took something from Matt's presentation about the continued value of the human approach to prompting, the human approach to even just a conceptualization, a design of the kind of audit and work that we is putting forward here just reminds us of that deep value that we bring to the world of broader professional communications.
Indeed, indeed. And again, with that, maybe let's look at what
Yeah.
you, the live audience, and those who watch the
Yes.
recording, you can get a sentiment. You know, the question we asked, and again, continue responding to some of you.
Mhm.
I see already started responding.
Yeah. So
Um,
AI is slightly
how do
ahead
you use
here in terms of, yeah,
interesting,
yeah,
interesting, right? And it depends. Probably there's some fragmentation of like what we would call like what information you search, right, Anita?
sure.
Like, I still
Definitely.
am a avid Wirecutter user for if I want to buy a new
Yes.
pan, or a new
Yes.
humidifier. So I trust New York Times and that, like, and their hefty team. But again, it's really actually really probably important here with our participants and learners also pointing to this shift that has already happened, that
Yeah.
organizations have to reimagine how they reach and measure impact and also measure their reach to clients and organizations. So our learners today are also, and those of you who are again watching this, you're seeing that, our participants also point to the need to think about GEO.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Let's
Now
look
let's
at.
see, have they been propagating I think the next question will be interesting too, building off of this, your go-to tool. Okay, that's still putting it together. Well, I'll continue to build off of that sentiment because I see myself, oh, here we go, the charts emerging. This is great. I see myself in that pie chart because as you say, it's
Uh-huh.
situational to some
Yeah.
extent where we might go depending on what we're seeking and maybe the stakes as well, and what kind of answer we need. But this is interesting to now dive a little bit into the granularity of, are there engines that are more popular than others?
Uh-huh.
And that it obviously our sample size here and our community here may have particular predispositions, but I think the fact that we have a multicolored pie chart here shows that people have
Yes.
particular preferences.
Indeed, yeah, right. I was just reading an article about the interesting amount of competition in the space, right? It's a kind of like the
Yes.
early moment of search engines, right? I remember,
Yeah.
I'm going to age myself, but the browser industry, etc. It's
Hmm.
been kind of an interesting. We went from multiple providers. Usually, we go from multiple to few, but we are
Yes,
in a moment of multiple. So I hope that we retain that
absolutely.
competitive spirit, because it really keeps companies, more customer oriented. But again,
Yeah.
this also is really interesting for us to identify, right? For example, Google, who leads the search engine space dominantly right now, is not
Yes.
as much, right? We're seeing from our learners prominent in this space, but there again, that multiplicity I think is really important to note. I also want to note that I don't know, Anita, if you're seeing it, but there's six of our kind of participants that says I don't use AI,
Yes,
I just use search engines too, and there is still that,
absolutely.
so I don't want to discount that as
Yes.
well.
And I think that it would be interesting to ask some of them if they want to put in the chat what leans them towards search versus AI. I think it could be a number of different things. I would love to hear. And I think we also, as humans, become habitualized to things, and that makes sense too. We trust certain platforms, or we trust certain um, um, systems that we've designed for ourselves in the way that we seek information. And as to that point about the multiplicity, I think I would love to hear people's opinion. I think we haven't yet had a definitive platform become the verb the way that Google did,
Mm,
or become the noun the way Kleenex did for tissue paper. So it'll be interesting to see whether there becomes some primacy that becomes a part of the
mm,
actual nomenclature around what it means
indeed.
to have generative search.
That's a fantastic point, Anita. And with that, maybe let's look at one more. I think we have one more question at the
Yes, let's pull it
cycle.
up.
So how does your mindset change when you use an AI tool to search instead of traditional search engine? I
Yes.
accept the results more readily. I verify more carefully than I would with the search engine. I approach it the same day. I hadn't really thought about it. So let's give, before we transition to our next speaker, because this is also the intentionality component, we'll continue there too.
Yes.
I want to see some of these answers. Let's give everyone a few more seconds. And then we're learning from you too, right? These tendencies and doing
Yeah.
live research. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that there's a lot of convening around more verification going on
Uh-huh.
when you use
It looks like
AI
there's a bit
versus
more
search.
of that careful consideration, and we're seeing a honeycomb developing over the I verify
Exactly,
more carefully.
exactly. Maybe people are craving honey. No, but it's true. And one of the core topics that we discuss in our program at the master's level across a variety of classes is about trust, building
Yes.
trust, and kind of being a trustworthy organization, and being, the trust around information, which are important
Mhm.
for today's content creators, marketers, communicators, people across all fields. So it's
Yes.
a really important insight, I think. If this holds true over time, we continue to verify.
Mhm.
It says it communicates something about trust. Your input is telling us that we should maybe consider and research about that relationship of trust, even if use doesn't equal trust always, right?
Yes.
So it's interesting, Anita. I'm seeing it in our participants' context.
Absolutely. And we know that that trust is so vital when it comes to not only things like marketing and brand loyalty, but also just our own personal belief in the veracity of the information that we're getting. And something that I think will come up in the conversation as we continue to move into not only our next speaker, but into the full sweep of the messages today is, were there times when information that you got from a generative platform was incorrect, and what were the consequences, and did that change your behavior in the future? Has that changed your thinking about the way that you engage, and then more broadly, how can we create systems that have more verifiable information that we feel the greatest level of confidence around? And so I think we're going to continue to push on that question as we move through our time today.
Indeed. And, one of our learners today and participants, Colleen, is shared that, a lot of young adults don't use AI because of environmental concerns. So there's like this
That's absolutely
complexity,
true.
and then this take on responsibility. And our
Yes.
next speaker, I think, really reminds us of that responsibility component and how to engage who's herself is a responsibility expert. So I'll turn it over to you, Anita, to introduce us who we'll hear from and learn from next.
Yes. So here we're going to get a chance to bring in our next speaker, Chang Liu. And I'm so thrilled that this is going to be a chance for us to now have words and ideas that will allow us to continue to have the conversation that we've begun here around the way in which we more intentionally use these kinds of generative platforms. And so it is my great pleasure to introduce Chang Liu to us today, and her talk, Beyond the Slop, Generate Human Avatars with Intention. So if I now may move into that transition, I'm so delighted to have, we are so delighted to have Chang today. She is an inclusive designer and a leader with over 15 years dedicated to fostering equity, diversity, and inclusion across a number of different industries. Chang has played a pivotal role at tech giants, that places that you would have, all of you on today will have heard from, such as Google and Meta, where she has steered just absolutely transformative DEI strategies that have not only deepened people's intentionality in that regard, but have really reshaped organizational cultures and product offerings. And this kind of expertise, we are so fortunate now exists in our classrooms at ComLead, because Chang is an affiliate instructor of ours at ComLead, and she brings that kind of thoughtful care and her passion for the way that she weaves DEI into the ethos of how technologies are actually built. And these kinds of conversations now come into our classroom on topics around responsible innovation, inclusive design, and product equity. I also have a little fun fact, which is that Chang is also a mushroom forager. And so when I think of mushroom foragers as being somewhat territorial about the way that they search out their mushrooms, but I think if you asked very kindly, she would very much be happy to share how she came about having that kind of hobby. So that's something that I wanted to also add about this next distinguished speaker. So without any further ado, I think we'll turn it over to Chang to take us into this very interesting conversation about the way in which organizations have conversations around the utilization of these platforms when it comes to human avatars, and the kind of ethical conversations, and then the kind of deep understanding of how intentional prompting can provide better guidance in the way that these the human avatars get designed. So really excited about this presentation. And with that, over to you, Chang.
Yes, Chang, great to have you with us. Thank you.
There she is. Hello.
Hi, Anita. Hi, Ken. I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you for that lovely intro, Anita.
We are so thrilled to have you here. And I promise no one will ask you where you get your mushrooms, because I know that that is a deep, deep secret.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to a trip soon together, Chang. But I'm also really looking forward to your talk today. I think it's a really much needed conversation. I know Embedded also, and we have fellow mushroom foragers in the audience live.
Excellent.
So fantastic. But again, we're not going to, unfortunately, or dive just into that today, but very fortunately going to dive into a topic I think really important for us all to consider. So we're turning it over to you, and we can't wait to learn from you, Chang.
Sounds great. All right, let's go. Thank you. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and for that lovely intro from Anita and Ken. So you heard that I'm a responsible innovation strategist, but what does that actually mean? It means that I work with companies and help them build products and services that bring value to everyone. And so today I'm super excited to have this conversation with you all about using AI to generate human avatars. Okay, so each year, Merriam-Webster's editor picks a word of the year. This is a word that best reflects just the collective obsession, the trend, and the news of a given year. So for 2025, the word of the year is slop. Of course, slop is a noun, is digital content of low quality that is produced in quantity by means of artificial intelligence. I think we're all very familiar with slop. And I don't know if there's one piece of slop that really got to you in the last year. Let me know if that's the case. But this is the piece of content that definitely got to me last year. Let me see if I can play this for you without the sound. So, let's see. So, there are these bunnies. Maybe many of you are familiar with the bunnies. So I'm scrolling through Instagram one day and these bunnies popped up. And the label on the video was something like, Ring security camera footage. And the thing about me is I curate my feed to be all funny animals, cute animals. So when there's a good one, I send it to my partner. Then I watch him watch it later so I can enjoy it again. I don't know if this is relatable to you as well. But this video made the cut. So later in the day, I'm cuddled up with my partner on the couch, and he's going through all of the reels that I sent him. And he gets to this one. He goes, "Oh, this one is AI." I was so mad. I was like, "Oh no, this one got past me." And of course, like anybody else would, I go to the comments wondering if other folks are feeling the same way. And I wasn't disappointed, or I guess I was disappointed and they were also disappointed. Folks are saying, no, I learned my lesson after the bear on the trampoline, which sent me down a whole, rabbit hole of all of these animals bouncing on trampolines. And people are just saying, I really want to believe that every animal bouncing on a trampoline is real. And I love this one, and I really resonate with this one. Someone just said, I'm getting scammed when I'm older. And I feel like I absolutely am going to get scammed. So, AI slop is ruining the internet, is ruining all of our favorite places to scroll. And of course, this example is one where AI slop is being super annoying. But AI slop can also be really dangerous, right? So when generating images with AI, especially when we're talking about imagery of people, this often has real world consequences. So we know AI systems are inherently biased and they reflect any existing biases in the data. They can also be used deliberately by bad actors to cause harm, right? So in both of these cases, the fallout can be really serious. So here are a few headlines that illustrate just a handful of harms linked to AI image generation. And these are only the tip of the iceberg. I was talking to Ken when building this session, and she said something that really stuck with me. And I think she speaks for a lot of us when she says, AI image generation. I arrive skeptical, I leave skeptical. And Ken is skeptical for good reason. AI is pretty scary. And newer, more advanced models seem to be released every week, day. Certainly AI has been in the news a lot lately. And we know that AI has the capability to deepen bias, to spread disinformation. It's shaping media narratives, contributing to polarization, invading our privacy, making us feel insecure about our jobs, right? So just to name a few of the concerns on this list, the reality is AI has real potential harm to harm people, whether that's individuals, communities, or from a societal perspective, organizations as a whole, and also the broader global ecosystem. So a lot of this feels, so outside of our control. And certainly we can talk about each one individually. But here I think whether you're part of an organization or you're building your own brand, AI can really also impact your reputation. And it's actually one of the areas that we have the most control over. So we all know this. Trust is hard to earn and easy to lose, right? And in an era of people arriving skeptical and leaving skeptical, that's only becoming more and more true. So when we create synthetic images, they can be mistaken for real, taken out of context, and spread faster than any corrections that we can send out, right? So in a world where we're constantly flooded with messages, attention is scarce and there's such skepticism. What sets you apart isn't going to be visibility, it's going to be credibility. So the choices we make when we think about how to use AI, such as AI image generation, is going to be a part of your brand identity and determine how credible you feel to your customers, your partners, and the general public. And big tech, AI companies know this too. I pulled these just a few days ago. I mean, Anthropic is really scaling up their communications team. So is OpenAI. And just check out this job from Netflix and the total comp, over $1 million. They're doing this because companies know AI slop is not resonating with audiences. So they're stacking their teams with the best storytellers. And we tell stories with words, and we also tell them with imagery. And often we'll say a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? It's because visual storytelling can be one of the most powerful ways for us to connect and communicate with our audiences. And with AI, we're entering this era where people can be generated on demand. And corporations, in the rush to move fast, to save money, to quote unquote hack representation, are turning to AI instead of real people or stock images. And as much as AI is very convenient at times, it also comes at a really big cost to harm to communities, but also, your brand and reputation. So let's look at a case study to dive a little bit deeper. So this is a case study for using ChatGPT and Midjourney to produce images used in marketing. As a part of a global campaign, a software company, perhaps a marketing team, is proposing the use of AI-generated human depiction. And they're going to do this by first generating a list of prompts from ChatGPT, and then using that list of prompts then to go to Midjourney to produce the images. So here's the prompt. Create a set of image generation prompts for marketing that depicts a diverse global audience, including a range of ages, skin tones, body types, abilities, gender expressions, and cultural context, right? So we're prompting for quote unquote diverse and inclusive prompts. And here are the real prompts generated by ChatGPT. And just by looking at these prompts, maybe you already spot some issues. A Black woman and a white man in their 50s reviewing a project in a modern Atlanta co-working space, a transgender Asian American person, and a white non-binary colleague in a San Francisco startup meeting, 2 Latina women in a New York office, one using a wheelchair, laughing over coffee, and a plus-size Indigenous man and a Middle Eastern woman wearing a hijab in a boardroom in Seattle. So let's see how some of these images turned out in Midjourney. So take a few seconds and look at each one of these 4 images and just ask yourself, would I use this image as a marketing asset? All right, this is that first prompt. Here's the second one. How does this image make me feel? Does it feel inclusive as intended? Does this image feel human or relatable? Does this image resonate with me? If this image were a part of a marketing campaign, would it make me want to buy and spend money with the brand? So when I share this case study, often people say the images make them feel a bit uncomfortable, but they can't quite name why. So let's explore some considerations that might be driving that reaction. So let's look at the first image. When generating images, I try to avoid binary pairings. So binary pairings like black, white, man, woman can unintentionally reinforce this default norm and center whiteness and heteronormativity. So it could nudge an audience towards a stereotype. And if the AI model repeatedly associates, professor or professional or beautiful or trustworthy or certain words with one side of the binary, it can also quietly produce a hierarchy. So here, the man on the right is dressed more professionally, quote unquote, and he looks to be explaining something to her. So overall, I wouldn't say this image is feeling the most inclusive. Here's the second image, right? The prompt here is for a transgender Asian American person and a non-binary person. But what does being trans look like? What does being non-binary look like? What does being Asian American look like, right? This is what Midjourney thinks. But gender isn't visible, and one's identity can't really be reliably inferred from appearance. So one consideration would be that we should describe observable features versus prompting for identity as a shortcut. Also in this image, I think gaze can also signal who the image is centering and who it isn't, and is something that is just good to be aware of. All right, here's the third image. When you prompt for an image of a disabled person or disability, 9 out of 10, or sometimes 10 out of 10 times, I would say, you will get someone in a wheelchair. And half of those times they're needing assistance. Someone is pushing them in a wheelchair. But disability isn't always visible. Disability doesn't have a look. There are non-apparent disabilities or disabilities that fluctuate over time, right? We should be really thoughtful about the portrayal of people with disabilities. And here, these women are also just kind of floating around in the middle of the office with their coffees, right? And here's the last image. A consideration here may be to decouple identities from stereotypes. So decoupling stereotypes that are often associated with communities of color, for example, being indigenous and overweight. And also this image feels like that it's just trying to stack so many identities into one image. And it feels like that it's performing diversity, right? And these weren't even the worst prompts that ChatGPT generated. These are even more ridiculous. I said, give me some global prompts, and it gave me these prompts. A young Irish woman with Down syndrome presenting at a whiteboard with 2 colleagues, a Japanese woman in a traditional attire and a younger colleague in a suit, an Inuit woman and a white man in casual attire, video conferencing from a rural satellite office. This one's my favorite. A gender fluid person and a Buddhist monk in training, reviewing data in a Hong Kong office. A Buddhist monk in training is probably not going to be reviewing data in a Hong Kong office. And of course, the last, a Jewish man and a Palestinian colleague working together in a Jerusalem shared workspace. I mean, all of these prompts are really problematic, and I, of course, did not go to generate these images. So this case study illustrates that even when you're not trying to generate images with malicious intent, AI still gets it wrong. And these images don't feel inclusive, even though that's the intention. And honestly, they don't even look very good, right? And so the takeaway here is human avatars. I call them human avatars because they're not real people. And it's not representation. Synthetic representations of people and communities can simulate human appearance, but they're abstractions shaped by training data. They're avatars, sometimes they're caricatures, and can never truly capture the lived experiences, histories, or identities of the real humans you're trying to build resonance with. And getting that is very hard because our identities, power, privilege, and lived experiences are all intersectional. And we show up in nuanced ways. AI just flattens all of these complex identities like race, gender, disability, and reduce them to very surface level cues. So you're not getting the cultural nuance, you're not getting the emotional context. So even when we have positive intentions, AI output can feel really performative, especially when we're generating them without consent or meaningful engagement with the communities we're trying to depict. So we have heard, and we will continue to hear, AI can't build trust. We need humans in the loop. We need to develop human skills in the age of AI. But what does that mean when we hear this? What are the human capabilities that we need to bring into this AI era? And I really think it means that we need to be human in a way that we can't feel like we're going to outsource building presence and what is true to AI, right? AI finds patterns and optimizes for efficiency, but it doesn't do any of these things. It doesn't think critically. It doesn't have moral or ethical judgment. So in this case, it doesn't know what is fair, safe, or respectful to generate, right? It doesn't have emotional intelligence. It's not really going to read the room. Also, it doesn't have creativity. It's just remixing a lot of what exists, and you're not going to get anything that's really new and cool. And I've been hearing this a lot around taste. AI can produce options, but it doesn't really know aesthetics and what is classic, what's trendy, or worthy of picking. And last but not least, I always go back to this. AI is not a good storyteller. It can stitch together a scene, but it can't really tell the story of what you mean. And so I invite you to bring these human capabilities and use this kind of light framework, I'm calling it the 4R lens, to highlight some key considerations for generating human avatars. The first R is relevance. Before going to AI and generating imagery of humans, you should ask, why are we using AI generated people instead of real customers or licensed photography? Is the goal here cost efficiency, speed, flexibility, or are we really wanting true representation? Is this synthetic diversity? Are the avatars grounded in actual user demographic, or are we just visually signaling inclusion without any structural inclusion, right? And will this AI generated content add or take away from the storytelling, right? So again, bring your critical thinking, your moral and ethical judgment, emotional intelligence, creativity, taste, and storytelling, and in asking yourself these questions. Once you've determined that maybe, yes, it is relevant, you can move on to respect and think about, are we creating avatars without consent from the people? If I were to ask, would I have consent? Are we generating culturally specific identities without cultural grounding? Whose story am I telling and how am I telling it, right? And then the third art is risk. Does this synthetic imagery reinforce bias or performative diversity by relying on stereotypes, westernized defaults, oversimplified cultural markers, tokenization, uneven beauty standards, power roles that cluster around dominant identities, etc. And could that create harm? Not only are we talking about, harm, real harm to the communities who are depicted here, but also reputational harm for the organization you're a part of or for your own brand by, losing customer trust. And also, is this creative? Is this tasteful? How is his work going to be critiqued? again, bringing all of those, bringing your humanness to asking this question. And last but not least, really thinking about responsibility, using that front page test. If this image is going to be splattered all on the front page of a newspaper tomorrow, who would be accountable for any potential consequences, right? Then you should ask, well, do I have the right review checkpoints to help me feel more confident? Who should I engage to feel more confident about depicting, people and communities? Also, did I disclose using AI transparently? Or is there an escalation pathway? And can I defend this decision publicly, right? So bringing all of your humanness as you go through and evaluate whether this is relevant, respectful, what the risks are and the responsibility is for generating human avatars. Just bring all of your human capabilities, because ultimately, I'll leave you with this. Avatars can imitate form, but only humans can bring presence. And that's how we truly connect with our audiences. We're moving towards a world where trust, reputation, and brand perception will be among the strongest competitive advantages. And having the discernment to know when and how to use AI responsibly will make you one of the most valuable people in the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chang.
Thank you, Chang. This was so thoughtful, and I know it generated a lot of questions for us and the audience too, and offering not only ways. One of our participants said, if the act of questioning the default, right? Kind of creating
Yeah,
new, and to your point, to methodologies of assessing our own production process, but then I really appreciated also you highlighting the kind of uniquely human skills at this moment too, kind of differentiating, and also between the avatars and the humans, and in the storytelling space, the nuance of highlighting that. So thank you so much. We look forward to engaging with you more in the Q&A.
Yes.
So, with that, Anita, maybe before we dive into our next speaker,
yes,
we can just jump into a couple activities that relate to this conversation, so that we can then
definitely.
see different. We can make sure that we have a sense of what everyone's thinking and reflecting about this space. So, let's go back to Mentimeter and discuss a couple questions that relate to what we just heard and learned. So, what's the first question? Let's see. Have you ever been tricked by an image you thought was real but was actually AI generated? I love the ring camera bunnies that Chang started with.
Yes.
I love that. That was a interesting example. So have you had, to our participants, it will be interesting. I definitely have been. What about you,
Oh,
Anita?
I absolutely have. I think one of my most, gutting moments was when I had fallen for a mama owl in a nest, pulling up her wings over her little owl chicklets. And it was just, I mean, it was one of those things. I was scrolling quickly. I saw it. It was so immediately just beguiling, and it was also it just, there was a maternal quality to it. There was a natural quality to it. And then I immediately went into the comments, not because I thought it was fake. I wanted to see what people had to say about it. And there was so much like, hey, if you fell for this, and I thought, wow, I need to work on my AI discernment. But I also felt, and I think we're starting to see in some of the comments here, that feeling of being duped really changes your emotional response to, and then subsequent trust in images. And in this case, the platform that I was on. So there's an
Hmm.
effect of not just simply the image itself, but also where you saw it, and then how that makes you feel about the platform that provided you that image.
Exactly. And I love the response here. Continue sharing with us, right? The cats acting super cute. I get daily
Yeah.
multiple cat videos from my father, who knows I like them. But many
Yep,
of them are, I don't want to break his heart, but are not. They're cat avatars.
that's right.
So it's really really interesting. Let's move on to maybe the next question too, as
Yes.
we get a sense of it. We have another. Chang dived into this, but we won't be. I know we have a lot of professionals in the field, so we want to get a sense of if you have used AI generated images of humans, so human avatars for professional
Yes.
use, and in what context, externally, internally,
Yeah.
or whether or not you
Yeah.
considered it too. Let's see what people are saying.
Yeah. Here comes some images that give us a sense of where opinion
Uh-huh.
in the group is falling. And I'm so grateful to Chong for sharing that wonderfully just actionable 4R lens. I mean that this
Uh-huh.
this is an example of a tool that's really going to allow individuals to take that back into their workplaces.
Indeed. And it's
Interesting.
interesting too. Yeah, yes. So we have
There's a
those,
yeah,
we haven't
look at
considered,
the yeah.
but then, yeah, that's really, really interesting. So there's a split, right?
Hmm.
And I think this is why this conversation is so important. We're collectively kind of setting the agenda and thought
Yeah.
around creating a platform, and that maybe certain practices are more will have certain priorities, like as Chong
Yeah.
mentioned too. I mean, we indeed have access to making human avatars, but there's also such a primacy and importance of the human perspective.
That's
So
right.
that negotiation is going on actively, as we're seeing in the responses too.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be the standard. The
No,
stock images don't have to be. So we have that negotiation going on. So I think really important to pinpoint that. Let's look at one more question,
yeah,
if that's okay.
absolutely.
So we've heard a really interesting responsible prompting framework
Yeah,
from Chong, and we are asking you how you can maybe apply components of it to your work. What's an action you can take? Because we
yeah,
are, again, learning is important, but I think at this moment also should entertain ways in which where we can apply the learning to our practice as well.
that's
So we'd
right.
love to hear from you.
And I'll add as we're awaiting some responses that I'm reflecting on the 4R lens that Chong has introduced in the particular context here of human avatars, but I'm thinking about how that 4R lens, you could actually use that discernment process across a number of, I mean, it has wide application. And so that's one of the things that's so exciting about events like this is that while you could take the 4R lens and have a very tailored conversation back in a workplace around human avatars, I think there's a lot to be said about the conversations around relevance and then the respect and risk and responsibility that apply to all kinds of different environments. So I'm thrilled by that, and let's see what some folks are saying here.
Exactly.
Additional perspectives, that's great. Yes.
Include as consideration as part of discussions, walk others through the prompt.
Yes, I see, looking at it as an ethical journey. I think it's so
Uh-huh.
important, and I think it's one of the reasons that in our program we have a law and ethics requirement because ethics has always been a key consideration when it comes to any adoption of new technology. So thrilled to see that idea of an ethical journey.
And then the reason to pause, right? That's really important too, because
Yeah,
sometimes the rapidity and the access, how quickly AI can generate,
yeah,
maybe sometimes takes away from the intentionality. The
that's
rush is
right.
not always good. I know, Anita, you've taught for years like classes and considerations on listening, right? Like
That's
the
right.
process is not about quick response. It's a
Right.
much more prolonged and thoughtful way of kind of engaging. So yes, these are all fantastic responses. I'll give everyone a few more seconds to write and share here. And again, we'll also share the results after the event with all of
Yes.
you. So just as an FYI. But with that, we have another fantastic speaker coming up. But before I bring on the speaker, one of the things I wanted to remind everyone we have amidst us former alumni of our program, also
Yes.
professionals joining us from all around the country and around the world.
And around the world, yeah.
And we had with us an instructor of our program too. And I just wanted to remind everyone that this event is part of a bigger ecosystem, and wanted to mention a couple upcoming opportunities within the program, as you just got to learn from a member of our community. So our program right now is accepting applications until April 1st for our second deadline. This is the final deadline for international applicants. We offer 3 tracks in Masters of Communication. So please, there's a QR code that you are seeing on your screen. Feel free to ask us questions too in the chat and elsewhere. In the chat is crowded by a lot of our alumni too, so they can share perspectives with you. But whilst we're giving you a 3-hour perspective, of course, our master's program has many classes and experiences that will be helpful to you as you craft your next steps in your journeys. So in addition to that, we also offer in the program short courses online too, particularly and around the area of AI. These are courses open to community as well as professionals, as well as our alumni too. They usually spend in the course 7 weeks and look at some. We've actually offered the first version of that, empowering marketing and communications with AI. We're excited to announce, by way of this event, that we'll offer a second course this spring called AI Powered Creative Workflows for Marketing and Communications, which will be kind of a lab space and an interactive online short course, asynchronous with synchronous, also discussion sessions taught by faculty of our master's program to look at this advanced kind of consideration for marketing and communication, to imagine how you can incorporate and leverage AI in your workflows, very much aligned with that intentionality, building systems around that, that this course will make a subject matter. So just wanted to remind you of that. I also want to remind you that our Miro board, which we'll use, is active, and continue sharing your inputs in the Miro board throughout, so that you are kind of inputting and co-creating with us too. I know that there's the Miro board started getting populated. I see Homer
Oh, a
Simpson.
Homer
Oh my
Simpson
God.
give. Of course, there has to be a Homer Simpson
Again,
give. Yeah.
this is a space for you to again co-create with us. We really believe in collaborative learning, so just wanted to remind you of that too. And we're diving deeper and deeper into practice. I think we're going to now transition into our third learning session and talk with Britta Gartland, who is at Salesforce, Agent Force, as a research architect, leading research and experience strategy, and has spent 10 years building trusted, human centered AI across research and product roles. By the way, a quick note is Brita got her PhD from our Department, University of Communication, University of Washington's Communication Department. Her career spans enterprise, startups, and academia, building programs and teams that distill human contexts and experiences into insights and frameworks that drive product strategy and innovation. So, as a product leader, she also looks at a lot of mixed research, systems thinking, and something that's been coming up a lot in our conversation today, human-centered design, that human-centeredness of it too. And today's talk is actually really important, I think, as we build with each talk with our brilliant speakers, because there's also this conversation about the tension between AI hype and human needs, which came up in your conversations today, and I know whoever is watching it right now are actively thinking about it and how it's impacting different fields. Britta is actively exploring, writing, and presenting about how UX roles are evolving at this moment. So this talk that we're about to hear will explore that revolution and evolution evolution that's going on in that ecosystem. The talk that she'll share with us today will examine new modes of human and AI collaboration and human strengths that will be relevant at this moment, particularly as we make sense of how we research, how we rethink UX, and she'll offer us frameworks by which where we can imagine the future of UX practice. Without further ado, I want to invite Britta to share her perspectives with us and to kind of imagine us. Again, I'm also really excited that today's talks cover so many ground in terms of very many different areas of practice. So we'll have Britta share with us from the field of UX and UX research.
Hello. Hi.
There's Britta. Hi,
Thank
Britta.
you for having me.
Thank you for
we're so
being
happy
with
to have
us.
you.
Yes, I think, as you've been hearing too, kind of all the talks really work well together, and really interested in your perspective today to tell us how the UX piece is being reshaped as a field, and the potential for, I think there's a lot of anxiety also for all of us and our participants today too, right? The human AI balance. And your talk really deeply addresses that. So we're turning it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm really excited to be here and be in conversation also with the other speakers. And this talk is gonna focus on, as Aiken said, sort of how we might reimagine user experience roles in the agentic era. And I'm a researcher primarily, but I've spent my career studying kind of technological change in the workplace, and starting with this PhD in the Department of Communication, a postdoc at the Department of Human-Centered Design Engineering as well at UW. But I've really been working at this intersection of AI technologies, organizational change, and human-centered design. And I've had the opportunity to be a part of sort of defining and applying human-centered AI across diverse sectors, as you know, from academia to startups to leadership roles at Tableau and Salesforce. I've really been focused on what I think of as sort of architecting the future of human AI collaboration. But today I sort of find myself in this somewhat ironic position. I'm sort of a subject in my own study. I'm not observing others as they are being disrupted. Rather, we are the ones being disrupted. And so today I kind of want to explore what this shift means for the future of our roles and craft. We are at an inflection point. Though we stand in the midst of a transition where we cannot remain standing. The future enters into us to transform itself in us long before it happens. And so I think the question is, how do we shape it moving forward? And that's what I'm going to try to tackle. So there's this fundamental tension I think we're navigating. This is sort of what people think AI can do versus what we actually want it to do. And Stanford's SALT lab did a really fascinating study with 1,500 workers. They took job tasks from ONET, which is a massive occupational database, and they mapped two things. They mapped workers' desire for AI automation on each task, and then the experts' assessments of AI's actual capability to do those tasks. And what emerged were these 4 distinct zones. So green light zones where there's high desire and high capability. So let's go. Red light zones where AI might have high capability, but workers have kind of low desire for automation, and those need extra caution. Low priority zones where there's low desire and low capability, and then R&D opportunity zones where there's high desire, but the technology isn't there yet. And you can think about sort of innovation investment there. But then researchers went a step further. They looked at where the investment was actually flowing, using Y Combinator companies as a proxy, and they found that 41% goes to low priority and red light zones. And in the places where people actually want the help, there was relative underinvestment. And so I just think this study, it's a great framework. It demonstrates this gap between human needs and values and technical feasibility and inevitability that kind of plays out again and again. And this is also where research and other experience roles I think, become critical, because what we do in organizations is we help them kind of cross this chasm and navigate these crosshairs and build paths for worker agency and human-first approaches to technology. Because I'm a researcher, I'm going to be talking about what is changing for the research domain a little bit more specifically, but these shifts are really happening for the broader set of user experience roles as well. And so this inflection point for us, it's not just about new tools, though. Yes, 90% of UX professionals now use AI for analysis, according to a user interviews study. And there are also new tools and infrastructure for agent log conversation analysis and collating feedback signals. Some of the stuff Matt was even saying is kind of similar to that. There's also multi-party AI moderation, which is emerging along with like an abundance of simulation tools for prototyping and synthetic users, which kind of relates to the avatars we were just talking about. But it's deeper than that. So our objects of research are changing. So we used to kind of study human interactions with a fixed UI, and now we're researching these adaptive AI-driven flows and behaviors that then are supposed to anticipate needs. The interface might now be a conversation, a dynamic dashboard, a personalized task list that reshapes itself as needs evolve. Or it might not have an interface at all. It might be shaping the model that powers a plethora of applications and behaviors. We need to focus, we've been focusing sort of more on these user journeys and personas, and those are still important, but now we kind of need to think about defining entire human AI systems. So understanding how people and AI work together as an integrated unit and finding ways to simulate, measure, and learn from behavior. Success isn't about whether AI is accurate anymore. It's about whether the system supports humans in appropriately relying on outputs. So this means preventing both over-reliance and under-reliance. And sort of we're developing new metrics for trust calibration. That is that process. And also the UX patterns that help people know when to trust AI and when to question it. So this is all certainly not all new, but I think it has accelerated very quickly, and it has diffused more broadly across our roles and disciplines. The environment for research impact is also changing. So last week, a stakeholder told me, I want my PMs to be customer insight driven. Just like, great. And then he said, well, but I don't need research to disappear for weeks and come back with a report. I just need embedded continuous insights. Okay. And so I think that is where the reality is right now, that the cycles are very compressed. Our windows of relevance are kind of shrinking as we need to kind of move beyond these studies to learning systems where there's instrumentation, there's signal routing, there's continuous optimization. And the other thing is our stakeholders' jobs are changing. The PMs, the designers, the ops teams, they're all using AI daily and also pushing the boundaries of their roles. And their mandates now include customer insights. So we need to be sort of partnering here with them as we move forward. And so I certainly don't have all the answers. There's a high degree of uncertainty in all of this and all that we're sort of projecting and thinking about. But one thing is clear. I think that the future is infused with human AI partnership, and it doesn't follow that linear replacement narrative, right? The future of work is messier, it's more emergent, it's more socially contested than that like more binary discourse of automation versus augmentation suggests. And so instead, I kind of think about it as a spectrum of human AI interaction modes, from more human-led to more AI-led. And in reality, as we work, we cycle through these modes constantly. And so on the x-axis, our tasks range from well-defined to emergent. And so that emergent is sort of, well, how will work actually reshape itself around these new capabilities and possibilities? And that we can't quite know yet. We can see, but we might not know. And so let me walk you through what this looks like. For defined tasks today, we're mostly operating in 3 modes. We're sort of in this assistive, right? Like human-led with AI support. So AI does a task, summarize this transcript, pull quotes from these interviews. Cooperative is more a shared partnership on defined tasks. So you're drafting a research proposal and you ask AI to generate a draft from your notes. You review it and rework it. You add necessary context, and then you ask AI to critique the proposal, so then you can refine it further. You go back and forth. Supervised automation is AI-led, but humans are still defining and overseeing. So think unmoderated usability testing. You might set up the bounds, but AI executes, but then you may supervise the results. So many analyses of AI in the workforce, I think, that are really eager to demonstrate clear shifts and job replacement don't tend to account for the generation of new categories of work and the messy rebundling of tasks and skills into new roles. And so for the emergent work, where those job categories are forming, we see different modes emerging. So something like orchestrated sense making. So this is human-led, but the work itself is new. You're architecting kind of human AI feedback systems, triangulating across data streams and signals, making meaning from a wider range of inputs with AI doing the first pass than you could ever have imagined before. Co-intelligence goes deeper. It's not just humans and AI operating together. It's integration so tight that a new form of intelligence kind of emerges. And Ethan Mollick has explored this in his book, Co-Intelligence. But in research, this might look like multi-party prompting for moderation and analysis, where the humans and AI are navigating ambiguity and uncertainty together. And then in that AI-led emergent zone, we'll see maybe what I call agentic experimentation. So agents are identifying feature optimizations, simulating them, and experimenting, potentially governed by organizational policy and key metrics. So we're already seeing bits and pieces of these emergent collaboration modes and categories of work. Very few people were vibe coding even a year ago, and now it's really redefining what's possible and who can do what. And I think it's really important. It's not just about adopting new technology and integrating that technology into our current research process. So much of what the future will look like is still emergent. And we know from decades of social science that inserting technology into an existing process doesn't yield the transformative value unless that process itself is reimagined and redesigned. And so I think this is really the foundation of how we think about socio-technical systems. And right now, organizations, I think, are in danger of sort of ignoring some of these lessons and adopting technology to automate existing tasks instead of actually redesigning work around new possibilities. And so if we zoom out from research work, right, we can see the larger ecosystem and larger process of product development that experience roles play a huge part in. And it's really about reimagining the broader process itself, that product lifecycle. And so this is just your run-of-the-mill product development lifecycle. So lots of variations out there. This is just sort of discover, design, build, test, ship, measure. And here we can see the larger funnel of the discover stage, where the problems and ideas are identified and then defined to move into the design phase. And then below, right, you can see the functions that are typically heavily involved or responsible for each stage. So from research and design in the beginning stages, and PM and engineering accountable for the middle, build, test, and ship, and then PM and research, again, evaluating the feature, prototype, and generating a feedback loop of learning back to the discover phase. And so in this life cycle, the bottleneck, it tends to be building and shipping. And we've tended to live in that world where there's typically more designs and ideas and research than can be manifested. It's a little bit of a straw man, but now with the new AI coding capabilities like Claude Code seismically kind of disrupting jobs and the outputs of engineers, we see the product development lifecycle start to shift. We can see that maybe it could be that bottleneck will no longer be building and shipping, but rather the evaluation and measurement and the feedback loop, just like driving discovery and design. The other shift that with AI building tools so readily available and accessible across functions, building and prototyping product becomes not just an end state and not just something engineers do, but it's something broader, more like a language for communicating, for bringing insights to life, for doing discovery and design. And so with that build, test, ship loop accelerating by orders of magnitude and a language of building that is now kind of accessible across functions, we can see the blurring and convergence of roles across some of these steps. So research and design and PM could be involved in all of these stages, and engineering could extend more into measuring and evaluating as they kind of work with other functions to develop like technical evals for models and agent systems. In this scenario, the value of different functions becomes more about learning in the wild and solving problems, more so than moving through stages. And it may become less about those particular functions themselves and more about the skill sets that people bring to those different problems. So the diagram could actually look even more extreme, right? So discover and design as stages could dwindle, but their sensibilities applied to the flood of builds within the build iteration loop. And in that build bubble, right, they'll still need to be the judgment of what to build and how to build it. But if the marginal costs of doing it wrong become that low, it could really shift the calculus. So we also see this role blurring and convergence in survey data. Noam Siegel and Lenny Rachitsky surveyed 1,750 tech workers across roles, and what they found was pretty fascinating. So for PMs, the biggest opportunity was for AI as a future AI job was research. So user research shows that this demand gap of 27 percentage points, and only 4.7% say that currently that their primary AI use case today is research, but nearly a third want it to be. And similarly for mockups and prototypes, typically in the land of design, although 19% say they do that task with AI today, there's 24% demand gap for doing that job with AI. And so for designers, we see the same desire for AI prototyping and an 18% demand gap for AI-driven user research. So I think this just shows that there's this huge opportunity space for AI to disrupt how these jobs are accomplished and how these functions relate within the product development lifecycle. So we also started to see this show up in how roles are defined across a spectrum of research functions. And so these were just some job descriptions I gathered in the last few months on LinkedIn. And I think they kind of show ways in which the emergence and rebundling is already happening a little. So first example was recommended to me. OpenAI is hiring a human AI collaboration leads who will study workflows, design new patterns of human AI collaboration, and generate insights that inform model deployment, blending research, hands-on experimentation, and product thinking. And so here, the outcome of the work is in the title, really. And we can see that there's this blending and rebundling of skills that typically lives across multiple roles into a single role. The second example is Alteryx is hiring a senior director of customer insights and research to unify UX research, data science, and voice of the customer and establish scaled insight infrastructure. So this highlights the rebundling of roles in the convergence of insights functions, and it also calls out an expansion towards the key job of building infrastructure to scale insights. Third example, Duolingo's PM job description just explicitly includes performing qualitative and quantitative research as a core job responsibility. So this is really showing how expectations for our stakeholders' jobs are changing and increasingly include core responsibilities from other functions. Job descriptions are imperfect signals, but I do think they provide a small window into how organizations are navigating and trying to adapt to the changing landscape. These descriptions demonstrate role and skill rebundling, and then this glimmer of category emergence. And it also doesn't look like, it looks like we're not all moving in quite the same direction for the research function. And this makes sense, right? Because we're all faced with navigating this jagged frontier of AI, which is a term that really speaks to and like in the scenario where some tasks are easily done by AI, while others that may seem similarly difficult or not within current capabilities. And so it makes it difficult to navigate. And research shows that, yes, people need to leverage AI for a range of tasks, but that we're also starting to see that people who are most successful are also the ones leaning into their human strengths in partnership with AI. And so I'll walk through 3 areas of human strengths that I see as key for the future of research work with AI. The first is boundary spanning, which is really about doing new expansive work in content or approach that traverses and potentially upends the pre-existing functional boundaries of your role or discipline. So vibe coding is probably the most visible example, but researchers are building interactive demos, spinning up concept apps, creating live stimuli, and testing ideas earlier and faster than ever before. So it may lead to changing how stakeholders see us, as well as kind of place us in new conversations. And it's sort of speaking this new language of building and using building to communicate. But it's also, it could be about connecting across functions, data streams, and organizational silos that don't naturally talk to each other. So in partnership with AI, you're pulling signals from customer support data, telemetry, sales calls, and research studies, sources that speak different languages, like live in different systems, serve different stakeholders, but maybe you're the one that can translate across those boundaries, synthesize meaning, and drive insights where others, might stay in their lane. I think framing innovation is another key human strength that we need to lean into. So many innovations get missed without the right frame. A PM hears how a customer implemented their agent and thinks, oh, they're just doing it wrong. But a researcher recognizes the user innovation hiding in that workaround, right? That's actually a signal of a deeper unmet need, potentially. So, and how many of us have tried to change a team's mindset? I think many of us have tried at some point, and I'm pretty sure that there were data and insights maybe involved, but probably the real shift came from how we defined the problem and framed what was possible. And here's the thing, AI excels within a frame. So if you give it clear boundaries, clear success metrics, a well-defined problem space, it's really phenomenal at optimizing, analyzing, finding patterns. But humanity's greatest strength is our ability to imagine, reframe, and assign meaning. And so we can look at the same situation and ask, wait, what if this isn't actually a retention problem? What if it's an onboarding problem? That act of reframing, machines can't fully replicate, and it really requires understanding context, culture, politics, and the ability to imagine possibilities that don't yet exist in the data. The third area of strength to lean into is really as an organizational catalyst. So it's converting insights into outcomes by mobilizing the attention, trust, and the right people amidst the inherent messiness of organizations. So this has always been the mark of truly outstanding researchers. You're presenting your findings while you're simultaneously working the room, right? You're crafting unique messages for each stakeholder because you know what will resonate. You're playing those politics, or maybe you're working the buzzwords of the week into your talk. AI can help us scale some of this work, but ultimately these tactics to transform insights into impact are situational, highly contingent, and require human credibility, relationships, and the navigation of informal networks. And in the agentic era, with that abundance of information and a lot of it slop and influencers, this becomes even more critical. So moving from an influencer role to a catalytic role where we're increasingly kind of sharing the ownership of those outcomes and making the messy and often invisible work of organizational wrangling and operationalizing ideas visible. And so then when I was thinking about how should leaders in the experience space really think about positioning research and their functions in the future, I hear some competing perspectives. Some say we need to move into higher level strategy and business work as like those tactical tasks get automated. Others argue, no, we need to embed more deeply in product teams and focus on driving and owning those outcomes. Like, I think it's both, and it's possible that research itself, right, like undergoes a kind of mitosis, right? We become multiple different functions, and people maybe come to know us for those specific functions rather than thinking of us generically as research. And so that disruption of our professional boundaries, that kind of unbounding of research might lead us to claim emergent identities that allow us to continue to grow and create impact. So I sort of wonder if it really won't make sense, like, to really call ourselves research anymore, potentially in the future. So there's different possibilities here. These are three that are just close to my own experience, but one is, the insight, infrastructure, learning, architecture path, right? So as data streams expand and AI can support that first pass at transforming data into insights, we need an insight infrastructure that integrates that like distributed, always-on data streams, that conducts analysis at scale and develops insights that draw on deeper human understanding of what is meaningful. And like, yes, this is orchestrating feedback signals, but it's not just orchestrating, it's about supporting that uniquely human work that's essential to how learning actually occurs. And the abundance of information does not equal attention. No one understands this better than we do. But at the end of the day, I think it's really about managing the organizational attention budget. And we need to kind of manage this finite and uneven attention budget through directing the most meaningful signals to the right people in the right moment. But we also have to weave data into narratives. That structure and that framing is what like directs the attention and creates coherence, aids memory, and ultimately transfers to decision making, which is what we're trying to impact. So I think that human AI partnership is essential if we want to architect these systems for learning. So the human AI interaction experience design and evaluation might be easiest for many of us to kind of understand, but because a lot of us are sort of already doing some of this work from a research and experience perspective. But I think defining and evaluating these patterns across a new ecosystem requires the new levels of flexible creativity and a deeper understanding of both human behavior and AI systems. These experiences as systems have multiple actors, feedback loops, and governance structures, and we're now kind of optimizing for the whole outcome, not a single touch point. This demands that kind of flexible creative pattern making, that trained ethical imagination, and then a working grasp of how AI systems actually fail and learn, and what does user success like really look like, and which contextual factors are actually meaningful. So that's actually the information that's most valuable to an agent when delivering contextually rich experiences. The other is embodied intelligence, and this is really the situated human capacity to notice what matters in context. For ethnographers, we understand this deeply, that we are our own kind of research instruments, and this intelligence kind of allows us to co-produce knowledge with participants, absorb that context that isn't captured elsewhere, and it supports that kind of relational sense-making that gives rise to the framing and the mental models. It also just provides us a way to have that situational judgment to apply and frame our insights in real time, and that is what makes a difference in decision making. So I think embodied intelligence will continue to be exceptionally important. And it also struck me after hearing my stakeholders say again and again that like they learn most from one-on-one customer conversations. Sometimes that can feel kind of frustrating. It's like, oh, well, but look at the research. But I realized they're really craving this embodied learning too. And that embodied intention is both the scarcest resource, but can be one of the most potent learning experiences. And so I think part of our job is really to lean into facilitating and structuring those embodied experiences for our stakeholders to understand more deeply. So what does this all mean? I think there are these multiple futures for user experience are unfolding right now. And as research and design functions are kind of reseeding and rerouting, And it might be that for research, we evolve into multiple functions that won't all be known as research. It's likely that the reseeding and new growth of roles and functions like challenge our current professional boundaries and our shared identity. These experience roles really have to adapt and grow, and leaning into our human strengths in partnership with AI. We need to do this to keep our jobs, yes, but for also our sense of fulfillment and meaning. And also because the world being built right now is better when our voices are shaping it. And so I think for us who've spent our careers trying to understand how technology reshapes people's lives and work, like it's our turn to be intentional, as this program wants to be, about how we reshape our own. And this means not just reacting, but really actively reimagining what user experience and what research can become in this agentic era. And as architects of human AI systems, we do that. We lead with intention. We conceptualize what is possible and what is desired at that boundary between humans and technology, and we bring that vision to life. And now we actually have tools to bring this more to life in more compelling ways than ever before. So leave you on a hopeful note. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Britta. Oop, stereo.
Yeah, we doubled in our thanks, but very, I think, valuable frameworks, and also really concretely seeing how this is happening and unfolding in real practice. And also now in the future too, the imagination of that collaborative flow was really thoughtful. So thank you so much for that. We look forward to talking to you in the Q&A a bit more about some of these topics. I know we've already received a number of interesting questions that follows up on this. So with that, maybe we'll expand on this talks, thinking, Anita, if that's okay with you too.
Yes.
With two questions that will kind of give us a sense of our community that's learning with us perspective. So let's look at those questions before, I can't believe it, we dive into our final learning session.
Yes.
Yes, the time is flying by when you're learning meaningful things and with really
Yes.
brilliant people. So the question is, in your current role, are you more of an observer or decision maker when it comes to AI policy? Decision maker is on the right side, and then on my right side, and observer on the other. So let's
Yes.
give everyone a few seconds to see that.
Yeah. And as we're waiting for responses, I appreciate the questions that are coming in on LinkedIn. There were some observations, really interesting observations coming off of Britta's talk. Some great discussion around the importance of interpersonal, and I think that's going to come. That's also a continued theme. What are the unique advantages that being a human bring to the way that technology is integrated? So I'm really excited to see the kind of responses that our speakers are getting in the live chat.
Exactly. We're hearing that folks are also really appreciating the insights that they've seen in all talks, but seeing that we're also cultivating some hope.
Yes.
People are saying that they're more hopeful at the moment. So that's great too. With that, let's dive into the next question too, if that's okay with you.
Perfect.
Has your team intentionally decided which tasks stay human, which tasks use AI? So let's see that. Do you talk about all the time, or had just one meeting? So it has been ad hoc.
Yeah.
Really interesting question too. And I just want to say also in the comments, Madeline highlighted one of the quotes that I really appreciated at the end of Britta's talk. The world is better when our voices are shaping it. And I'm seeing a lot of comments also of, reinserting the human. Sometimes we feel like we have no agency, but I think today's conversation is reinserting hope in human agency at a pivotal moment. So let's
and
see.
again, the advantage of being professional communicators is that we can be the best advocates for that kind of approach.
Indeed. And it's interesting too, the kind of amount of time spent, right, with key decisions and intentionality. So there's a kind of a split right now from this question. about
Yes.
when to use AI, or that collaborative aspect actually ad hoc got just
It
ahead,
just,
right? Like, and I think that's been my experience too, kind of on an ad hoc level.
yeah,
Like, is this something we can do with AI, but not necessarily part of our strategic planning yet?
right.
And Britta's model actually really reminds us and inserts that strategic planning component, and how we have to be intentional at our organizations, which is a
That's right.
great uh, intro or segment or segue to our next and
Yes.
final learning session before we dive into a panel discussion with all the speakers. But Anita, who's next?
Yes, I'm excited to introduce our final speaker. And this is the one and only Cheryl Lowry. And I know we're going to be bringing up a slide here, yep, on Cheryl's talk for us today and the learning she's going to share with us: preserving judgment and evidence in organizational AI, provenance versus probability. And I'll tell you a little bit about Cheryl before we bring her on here to the screen. She's a content designer, a UX strategy leader with over 25 years of experience working at the intersection of technology, communication, and human behavior. And we've just been talking about human behavior, how appropriate. She has led content strategy and UX writing at companies including Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and Block. And she really, in those roles, focuses on making complex systems understandable, making them humane, and usable at scale. She is no stranger to ComLead. She's not only a graduate of our program, but she's returned to the classroom a number of times as a guest speaker. Some of you may have seen Cheryl as a judge at a Screen Summit in the recent past. And I'm excited because she'll be co-facilitating with another one of our grads a session in the future this spring called Designing a Resilient Career, which could not be a more timely topic. Fun fact, Cheryl is a friend to pigeons worldwide, and so much so that she has a magnificent pigeon tattoo. So with that, let's bring Cheryl in here to the room. There
Cheryl.
she is.
Hey.
Hey, Cheryl, thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited about your talk and your perspective at this pivotal moment, because, as we were all discussing and earlier, kind of reflections from our learners today is too that like organizational level decision making, how organizations are trying to internalize systems, build systems, incorporate AI, and maybe sometimes too quickly. Right, and we've also seen concerns around the type of information we receive, and not always kind of directly taking the information we get from these tools for granted. So I know that you're going to explore some of those topics. So I'm handing it
Very
over
relevant to my talk. Yes.
exactly. All the talks today kind of built onto one another. So turning it over to you, and can't wait to learn from you.
Great. Okay, here we are. Hello, I am Cheryl Lowry, and my talk is on the role of truth in AI systems. So I've worked as a content designer creating product communication experiences, as mentioned, at Block, Amazon, Meta. And I've built systems like standards and tools that create consistency across digital products. This involves establishing a source of truth, like a style guide, and making it scale across products and people. So when I say truth, I'm talking about epistemic truth, which is standardized human judgment about what is considered authoritative within a system. Examples of this would include policies or laws, or in the case of content design, style guides that determine how digital products sound. So an example of epistemic truth in a system is the Unicode Consortium's emoji standard, which I think some of us are familiar with. It formally defines each emoji and assigns it a unique code point, which establishes a shared technical reference that every single platform follows so that we all know what these things mean. Okay, so what about AI? That's what we're here for. AI it aims to industrialize the process of making decisions and answering questions, which is a big deal. So where does that leave establishing truth? So a lot of us are being asked to build or use AI systems that produce confident answers, but how do we know that these answers are true? And if they're not true, who is going to be responsible? Okay, so here is my thesis. I believe that as communications professionals, we have an obligation to understand AI's relationship to truth, to know how and why it arrives at the answers that it comes up with. And this involves looking past the hype and the speed cycle that we're in, which I think is really hard thing to do when we're all concerned about our careers, right? So the profit incentives of industrializing thought are enormous, obviously. And it's not surprising that we're not being encouraged to use our human minds to stop and think about how or why it works under the hood. But I think that, and I think this echoes some of the other talks, if communications professionals are not going to do this, who's going to do it? This is our time, right? So I'm going to talk about this in two parts, starting with structure. The purpose is to provide a high-level starting point or a framework for analyzing or asking further questions about where truth lives in the AI systems you use or work on. So I'm going to start with generative AI because it's the type of AI that we're most familiar with. And in its simplest form, it has a pretty weak relationship to epistemic truth. You prompt it and it uses an LLM, a large language model, to assemble a probable and human-sounding response from analyzing a lot of examples of language patterns. In other words, things that we have written. So we've all, going back to slop and the bunnies on the trampoline, we've all probably had the experience of asking ChatGPT something and getting a fishy answer. So one day I asked it whether there was a crystal shop nearby. I live near Bellevue in Washington. Oh, sure, it answered. Why, yes, there's Soul Spirits at Crossroads Mall. And convincingly, it described, and I quote, a very approachable vibe, more mall metaphysics than hardcore new age. Because it knows how people use language to persuade, because it's analyzed how we talk. So this is a trust signal. So you know what comes next, of course. There was no such place, as I suspected. And what it said to me is, I produced a plausible sounding but fictional store. This is a confession. And this is totally fair because this is exactly how generative AI is designed. It's designed to sound convincing without being anchored in fact. So it was doing its job. So now I'm going to briefly describe 4 AI models that are designed to include epistemic truth in their architecture. Starting with rule-based AI. So rule-based AI uses human-authored rules and formal logic to make decisions. In rule-based AI, the system follows explicit human-written if-then rules step by step to produce predetermined answers instead of relying on probability. So you'll see rule-based AI in things like tax software, medical decision tools, or compliance systems. It almost functions like a decision tree. The second type of AI, factual AI that I want to talk about is human-in-the-loop. So human-in-the-loop AI is a system where a person reviews and approves or corrects AI's output before it's final, which helps to ensure accuracy and safety using human expertise. An example of human-in-the-loop AI would be medical imaging AI, where the AI system may flag potential issues in, say, an X-ray or an MRI, but then the radiologist reviews and confirms the findings before any diagnosis is made. Again, to supply that contextual human expertise that we've been talking about in the other topics. Or the interpretation of a professional person, in other words. My third type of AI model for truth is authority-anchored AI. In an authority-anchored AI, the system is constrained to an official source of truth, and it cannot go beyond that. In authority-anchored AI, when a user asks a question, the system has to check an official source and answer only from what that source authorizes. It cannot fill in gaps or speculate. The goal is not to generate the best sounding explanation, like ChatGPT did in my case, It's to reflect the organization's formal positioning, which is epistemic truth. So for example, a legal AI that answers only from binding statutes or precedential case law, and it will say no applicable rule instead of guessing or making up an answer. So finally, we have RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, which is fancy, but it means something pretty simple. And I've personally worked with this one. In RAG, the model must first retrieve facts from an established knowledge base of human curated information that the language model can then use to form a human sounding or a probable answer grounded in those facts, which differs a bit from authority anchored AI, which is more of a direct quote. So this is sort of combining what ChatGPT brings to using a source that is factual information. You'll see this a lot in enterprise chatbots, where the AI first pulls information from the knowledge base that's relevant to the question, but then it can use a language model to form a conversational answer. All retrieval augmented means is that it's retrieving answers from a vetted source. It's fetching them. So in the case that I worked on, our knowledge base contained verified information about HR programs. And instead of looking for patterns across all documents in our intranet, which, as you probably know from your own intranet, contains a lot of unmanaged information, our chatbot could only use the knowledge base for a source of truth before the LLM formed a friendly sounding answer. So to summarize my points about structure, you can design AI for epistemic truth. And I think it is upon us to learn how to diagnose where and whether truth lives within the AI systems that we use. And finally, and on the positive note that we've been sounding here, building and managing epistemic truth in AI is a job for communications professionals. Whether or not the industry knows it yet, it's us. So on to part two, which is why are we industrializing thought? This is also a question that I think communications professionals should have a point of view on. And one of the things that's exciting about our program is that we have the opportunity to think in terms of theory. So here's my point of view. So AI is talked about in every workplace and article as inevitable, like it's a weather event happening to all of us. But building technology that industrializes human ability is just capitalism at work. That's all it is. Communications theorists have been talking about this process for a very long time. So I know that a lot of us are familiar with Marshall McLuhan, the Canadian media theorist who famously coined "the medium is the message." And in his book, Understanding Media, he talks about the myth of Narcissus, in which Narcissus falls in love with a reflection that he mistakes to be something greater than himself. In speaking about AI tools at Meta, Mark Zuckerberg said, "We're starting to see projects that used to require big teams now being accomplished by a single, very talented person." And he believes this, that AI tools are greater than the human teams that they have replaced. But back to the structure of AI, where do the things that AI knows come from? Who provides the facts and the language that it consumes? The team is still there inside of AI tools. As Jaron Lanier said in his book, Who Owns the Future? There will always be humans, lots of them, who provide the data. Their value is just moved off the books. So when Mark Zuckerberg talks about AI tools as being greater and more powerful than people, he's still talking about people. The intelligence in AI tools is not artificial as much as it is abstracted and amplified. That AI is inevitable or greater than people are myths. They're stories that express market goals instead of reflecting reality. The French philosopher Roland Barthes says that myths take things that are shaped by culture, power, and politics and presents them as foregone conclusions, stripped of history. Barthes called plastic the myth of infinite transformation. Unlike wood or stone, the substance of plastic does not trace back to a source or a form of origin. Its history has been entirely hidden from us. It's defined only by what it can become. This is why plastic and the inevitability story of AI are myths. They both hide their origins and present themselves as pure possibility. The oil, the labor, the human expertise, the language patterns disappear, and what remains is a story of pure profit potential. So to summarize, this is my current point of view on AI, and it informs how I approach working on it. The source of AI is human thought. AI is a market decision. It's not a myth of inevitable progress. And communications professionals like us have a role in designing for truth. So to conclude my talk, in a well-timed moment of irony last week, while working on AI content systems, I was laid off from Block, in the ablocalypse, as we have termed it. Of this layoff, Jack Dorsey said, "We're going to build a company with intelligence at the core of everything we do." And in a sense, I will still be there because some of my intelligence remains in those tools. Those tools are made from our intelligence. I think that we have a unique opportunity as people in this field right now to stop and think about our role in building technology that works for people, that is designed for trust, and that tells a true story about how it's built. I don't think these jobs are going to be handed to us, but we have an opportunity right now as communications professionals to figure out what that work should look like. Here's our tree again. Thank you.
Cheryl, what a thoughtful and a comprehensive consideration that ties so many different themes and also really leaves us with very important questions about the human AI interaction, but also this inevitability question that I often tackle with and struggle with myself. And you put it so wonderfully and so honestly. So we really appreciate your candor. Before we'll turn to you in just a minute in form of a conversation with also our other guests. One of our commentators said we hope to see a TED talk from you in the future, Cheryl.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I hope
That-
so too. Yes,
Never say never.
exactly. Gretchen, our associate director for programs, says thanks you, and indeed, a lot of shared sentiment in the comments too. So before we dive into those questions for all of you, we want to kind of dive into a final sentiment check from our audience as it relates to some of the key issues that also Cheryl brought up in her talk. So let's go to our final Mentimeter before we invite our speakers back onto the stage. So we have a few questions for you as we make sense of kind of these key issues. When you use AI, what primary role does it play for you? Like, how would you define that relationship? A thought partner, assistant, teacher?
I remember in a training that Gretchen organized for faculty at ComLead, one of the speakers presented the idea of AI as a combatant, that it was for
I love
sparring,
that.
and had some excellent ideas for the way in which you could
Yeah.
engage AI to really thresh out ideas. So that's one we could have added.
Indeed, and it's interesting too, right? That like this tension, like, are we learning?
Yeah.
Because to Cheryl's point, I really appreciated that part of like the lingering AI keeping a part of Cheryl's intelligence and all of these tools trained
Yes.
by content and information we created ourselves. So
Yes.
so that indeed that, like, maybe we are the teachers, you know, but also again that
Yeah.
kind of identity itself, the complexity of it too, is so
That's right.
interesting. Let's move on to another question. We have
Yeah.
3 that we're concluding with. Have you ever seen someone make a poor decision because of inaccurate AI? It's a really important question too, because again, that this final talk really made us see that sometimes the drive of the systems that we utilize that are embedded
That's
with
right.
artificial intelligence, the motivation is not always accuracy or truth, right? It's more about creating something compelling,
Yeah.
for us. But being compelling doesn't always, not everything that's compelling. We live in a world that we see it every day is
Yeah.
accurate, right?
That's right.
There are very inaccurate things in the world that are very compelling to people. So,
Yes.
accuracy and being convincing, these are actually very much about the core of it is in the arts of communication and understanding of communication. So
That's
it's
right.
very, very important. But let's look at some responses. Interesting that many of our learners, Anita, are saying that I suspect it has, but
Yes.
I couldn't pinpoint to a specific case.
Yes. And I think this raises the idea of we need to have conversations amongst ourselves about and share ideas and share our uses and also share the failures. I was talking to a friend who is a pediatric doctor in Boston, and they've been having some very important conversations about how to intentionally build these fact-based AI platforms that are only using peer-reviewed papers to generate information, because
Yeah.
otherwise there have been situations where the information they got could have led a diagnosis down an incorrect path, and that's not something you want to see.
Indeed, Madeline in the comments just shared that it's true. It's and this also relates back to Cheryl's talk too. It's so easy to create AI videos to spread
Yeah.
disinformation, right? Not
Yes.
just myths, but this, right? Like the
Yes.
intentional work of trying to create and spread and convince people with information that's not accurate. So we live
That's
in an
right. We
age
saw
of
that with the situation down in Mexico. I heard lots about intentionally misinformation being spread about the situation, the severity, and trying to communicate with people that were perhaps traveling there or wanting to leave. It was really challenging.
And to Peter's comment, thank you, Peter, for that comment too. As educators, we often have deep discussions in our field too about like what's the role of education at this point, and why should we know? And I always say, imagine that you have a co-writer, co-author, right? I know that Suna called AI another employee in the comments, right? Like someone you're working with.
Yeah.
But in someone you're writing with, for instance, or in that collaborative environment, you wouldn't anticipate that they didn't know the very act that you're collaborating on. So Peter's comment really highlights that, right? The more you know about a subject, the more you can detect AI. So that going back to Britta's talk too, in that era of collaboration, I think human expertise still is very much a need. So, and these deep conversations are a part of that. Let's go to our very last Mentimeter question so that we can bring
Yes.
more of your perspectives. When your organization adapts
Mm,
AI tools, are you taught how they actually work?
right.
So, do you receive a formal training? Are you trained on both usage and how it generates answers, or are you just trained in how to use it, but nothing
Hmm.
else, right? Or your
Right.
organization doesn't use AI tools? It's a really interesting question.
Hmm. Interesting. We're seeing some parity across the
Uh-huh.
respondents so far.
And it's concerning, right? If there is indeed, there are a few folks here who are with us. And I've seen this happen across workplaces too, that have received no
Yeah,
formal training,
that's
right?
right.
We are, asked to incorporate it in workflows or consider their use, but the
Hmm.
training component is not sometimes any area of investment, and that's
Yes.
really concerning. Or to the point of the point there, and many of you are answering that way. If you're taught just the tools, right? But not how it operates. To
That's right.
develop the critical lens that Cheryl also ended our program considerations with, right? So it's
Well, and
so
I
interesting.
it's so interesting. And I'd even posit that before the training and the tool is even introduced, how much has there been a conversation with that employee about the utility of that tool, how it would be integrated? And so as opposed to the training happening without any kind of agency or investment from the individual who will be most impacted by the integration of that tool. And it's, so for me, it's not even just training, it's also the conversations ahead of time around integration.
Indeed. And with that, I just want to thank all of you for kind of continue contributing in the Miro board, but I want to invite back our speakers. You asked
Yes.
many questions throughout the space, and we tried to kind of bring them together. So we're going to start the Q&A now. And again, in the chat too, there were so many questions. And again, we have a dedicated student team who has culminated those questions for us. And we kind of try to thread them together so that we can bring different perspectives that's represented by way of our wonderful speakers who have, again, I leave today so rich, and I just want to leave a bit, in deeper thinking, because so let's invite back our wonderful speakers into the conversation. We end with a little panel discussion of sorts where we're able to, it is the case that your perspectives and discussions really tied well together, almost different chapters leading into various practice aspects, concerns that are at the top of mind. So we tried to kind of thread some questions that have come out to address some concerns, and I'll ask you all to like briefly respond each with the first question, if that's okay. I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to Anita maybe for the second one. Briefly, we'd love to, one thing that really stood out to me in questions, that in comments for all your talks, is this relationship between trust and credibility that we have to really reflect on. When Matt was talking, preventing malicious GEO inputs, or like, to maybe tarnish a company's reputation, how to manage like information that you can't control, to who generated what, to building trust in organizations and AI systems, building trust in a new way of doing work, right? And then also kind of the more directly too, like building rethinking trust, because we don't know what we're seeing, who created it and who generated it, and in what ways. These are all themes that have already been covered, but would love to dive a bit deeper and hear from each of you. Maybe we can start with you, Matt, and go in the order we started, so we hear back your voices. What do you think about your relationship to trust and credibility? Someone working with clients, organizations, in consideration of how AI is allowing us to reimagine and maybe forcing us to reimagine work?
Yeah, I think put simply, I don't ever fully trust AI because it's my credibility that's on the line. And so I tell people that we work with, it's never okay to say, oh, sorry, that was wrong, I got that from AI. And that you never are putting something forward for review by a colleague or a leader in your organization, and you're never putting something in front of a client that you don't feel good about. And so on that whole sort of dynamic of how to use AI, I like to think of using AI as both a thought partner and assistant. But because we know AI has a sycophancy problem and it wants to please you and make something that sounds good, as Cheryl talked about, I address those in the way I prompt AI, in the way I push and prod AI to show me its sources, to explain how it's arrived at different conclusions, so that I can click through to sources, or I can read things and back them up before I feel good enough about that. I feel good about this analysis, and I'm going to use it in what I am ultimately creating. And so I think right now, with one of the best things you can do is just learn more about how the tools work and how to prompt them, so that you can limit the amount of hallucinations and stuff it makes up, use it to help you think faster and analyze things, and then validate those sources before you put something forward.
So interesting, yes. A new workflow, as it were, which to Britta's point to Chango, what about you? Like trust and credibility, what comes to mind?
Yeah, this has been such an enlightening day, and I have so many thoughts swirling in my head. But the one that's coming up for me right now is that, we're definitely in an AI arms race, right? Often we say that and we say, well, companies are moving fast. And so they have to balance these trade-offs with responsible AI and building trust. And so we know that building trust with your customers is just the right thing to do. And I think we've also all covered here that it's also good for business. And often there's kind of a calculation that organizations do of like, how much trust do I need to build as compared to maybe how much agency do we have as users to demand the trust that is built into the product, right? So when we look at different businesses, maybe there are some we have very few choice. Like if you're in Seattle and you want electricity, there are very few companies you can select from, right? So sometimes it's hard to opt out of like, I don't want energy from this company because I don't believe they're using AI ethically, as compared to if you're shopping for certain brands like clothing or accessories, you have many, many options. And I think fundamentally a lot of organizations have the wrong calculus of how much trust that they need to build with consumers in the long run. Because with AI, there are disruptions in the industry happening all the time. And for the companies who think, I'm okay for now because I'm going to go, full speed on this AI arms race and worry about the trust with my customers later, it's going to be okay. I think that is a wrong calculation. And I think that making trust, your brand reputation, very central to the core of your business is ultimately definitely the right move for business. So that's what I think about trust. I think businesses should definitely think very heavily about this.
Thank you. What about you, Britta? I know that you're kind of advocating for new workflows, reimagination. How does, and you mentioned this too, trust and credibility come into that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think about trust. There's so many ways to think about trust. I think about it right now for, in an enterprise context for organizations, how do they build trust? And I have been saying for a while here and trying to convince people that really trust is the adoption gap. That is the actual adoption gap that companies are seeing. And I think hopefully it is aligned with the ROI that they want to see and that they will invest in those ways. Because I think a lot of the trust comes from the systems around those models too. Like we see that a lot of it is about managing the sort of statelessness and unpredictability of those models. And so that becomes like the differentiating kind of quality of a system. And I also just think about it in terms of user experience, like how do we help people appropriately rely on AI, and how do we give them those like cognitive forcing functions and add friction into their workflow or present the level of uncertainty or like all sorts of ways that we can help people understand that they have to do some calibration and give them the tools to do that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. What about you, Cheryl? I think there's a lot of notes of discussions of trust and credibility in your thinking, and it was in your talk too. How would you further that?
I think simply put, we need a higher bar for provenance in both tools and in the work that we do as comms professionals. So for example, I believe that ChatGPT is a bit of a dark pattern, borrowing from the credibility of the search era. And I think that ChatGPT should do a better job of citing its sources or making that available to people. So if we're in a position of advocating for transparency in AI tools being built, I think that's an area we should advocate for.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you. I'll turn over to Anita again. We've tried to, just for the for those of you, again, synthesize your questions into like themes so that we can
Yes.
dive deeper quickly. So Anita, what's your next question?
Yeah, this is the second question that is an amalgamation and really stitching together, as Akin said, so much of the emotional queries that we saw happening on the threads has to do with the human experience. And in the case of all four of you, you manage people. You also, in many cases, are dealing with external clients. So when it comes to that human experience, what are some challenges and issues that you're seeing with AI adoption when it comes to your teams, when it comes to those that you also engage with your publics? If you could talk just a little bit about either some anecdotes or stories or examples that I think will really provide us that additional kind of texture as we think about the kinds of challenges and also potentially the kinds of interventions that you're doing or encouragement you're doing or systems that you've been putting in place to try to allay some of those potential issues in adoption of AI in your teams and with your publics. How about we start with you, Britta?
Okay. So, I mean, I think this is a really challenging time. Just going to say, like, I think there is, for at least experienced disciplines, there's a lot of anxiety. And so I think, you know, there's managing that with some, I think with like hands-on experimentation a little bit that allows people to kind of feel like they are part of defining what is going, like
Yes.
the future of how they're going to use the tools. And I am encouraging that we do that sooner than later, because like I would rather we define that than it come from top down that we have to do XYZ in this way and that way. And so that's my very pragmatic approach. But I think, you know, like I said in my sort of thing, like there's the defined things. Like I think there's some stuff we know about how our workflows are changing and kind of getting everyone up to speed. And then there's like the experimentation part and, you know, trying to lean into sort of the fun, the creativity in that. But also I think on the flip side of that, everyone's experimenting and it's the Wild West and all our stakeholders have different things. And so it is not easy to kind of navigate that and get, you know, your voice kind of heard amidst a lot of voices. So
yeah, well, I appreciate the candor. Yeah. Let's now turn to Cheryl, and then how about we do Chong after that and end with Matt?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to create a safe space for ethics because in organizations, rigor and accuracy can be framed as blocking progress. And I think the more people speak out in exacting terms about the importance of accuracy and human judgment in certain parts of the pipeline, the safer people will feel to lead with that as a professional point of view and not as something that makes them appear to not be AI forward, which we hear a lot in organizations.
Cheryl, you said
thanks so much, Cheryl.
Oh. Cheryl said the thing I was going to say, but I'll add to it.
Go ahead.
I think, you know, everyone is using AI and being asked to use AI kind of in different ways. You know, as we talked about, there are folks who are just experimenting with it. And, you know, we can talk about kind of digital redlining and the communities left behind, a whole separate conversation. And then there are people using it in a very ad hoc way. And maybe some people moving into a more structured and defined use of AI. So both in the workplace and in society, I think as leaders, we have to be really clear about our expectations, right? At work, often you just hear, we have to use AI, but how? You know, are we going to use it in a safe to fail environment? What do those parameters look like? Are we expected to use AI in more structured ways when we have more defined, workflows? I think as leaders, we need to make sure that the expectations and our knowledge is matching what we're communicating to our teams, so folks are not confused about when and how they should use AI. And then you layer the ethics part of it and the human, the loop part of it, and people are just very confused about how they should approach this.
Great. So Matt, I want to, again, to come to, for this human experience, what are you seeing in your teams? What are you hearing from your clients? And then how do you approach those challenges and issues that really come from that human use case example? Oh, can you unmute?
That would be
Thank
helpful,
you.
wouldn't it? I
Welcome
think the
back.
biggest challenge is the gap between all of the hype and promise of what AI can do and the reality of making those things happen within a secure and enterprise environment with the tools people have available to them. Right. And so it's like, wow, with AI, you should be able to do X, Y, and Z. And you're like, I got Copilot and enterprise chat GPT and nobody's trained me how to use it. And so it's filling that gap. And the challenges we're seeing are people getting frustrated because it's like, you've got this FOMO, I should be able to keep up. And I heard about this really cool use case, but I can't do that. Or people diving in and trying and being like, this is crap. What I get back, and then not wanting to like press further. So the challenge has been really positioning it and continuously positioning it as a new language that we need to be able to speak. That the more you experiment and learn how these tools work and interact with them, the better able you're going to be to get value out of them as it continues to progress. And just reiterating that, like, we want you in there experimenting and experiencing what the limitations are, because we need, like, there's this ethical part as communicators to be like, no, we should not be using it this way. We should be using it this other way. So to me, that's the biggest challenge, is just that gap.
Thank you all. Ken.
Yes. So I want to end with a quick maybe response from all of you. I want to end slightly maybe positive-ish note and identify a path forward, as it were, not necessarily a hopeful, but path forward. You all identified many anxieties, opportunities, hypes, gaps, right? So we are joined by a lot of learners today from all around the world who are motivated to make sense of this moment. Maybe people already in teams, current students in communication and design and content, past students of that as well. Given everything you're seeing on the ground, and again, embedded in what you considered today, very quickly, in one sentence or one word, what would you recommend people in terms of what's one skill, technical, creative, or deeply human, that you would want our learners today that are joining us live or later as in the recording to think about, to read about, to invest in? What's that one thing that you want to urge the audience today to kind of consider more, or spend time learning more of? Maybe we can start with Cheryl.
This will be a couple sentences, but
It's okay.
Communications is the skill that we need right now. I think in organizations, you're encouraged to vibe code, and all those things are wonderful, and I've done them, and they're valuable. But I think that the skill that we bring of analyzing systems and connecting people is so necessary right now, and no one should be talked out of thinking that that needs to lead in terms of how they're implementing AI.
What about you, Matt? And then I'll go Britta and Chang.
Yeah, if we're talking about skills to build specific to AI, I might have kind of a contrarian point of view here. A lot of people think prompting is going to be less necessary as AI gets more conversational, but I think the most important thing you can do right now to figure out how AI can help you as a human is learn as much as you can about how to talk to the tools and direct them to do the things that are going to be helpful for you in a way that you feel that you can trust.
Thank you. Britta?
So I think I might go back to kind of boundary spanning. I think, one way you can think about, what it is you think you do, and your discipline and your job does, and try to think about how AI might be able to support you boundary spanning. And I think that really has to do with understanding the language, like Matt said, and really using that language and seeing where its constraints and its limitations are.
Thank you. Last but not least, what would be your skill that you would want to highlight or for our audience and learners to consider?
I would say storytelling, and most importantly, storytelling and understanding of who you are, right? AI is going to be the generalist, and we all have to be experts in something. And the most important expert you can be is in yourself. We all have diverse experiences and work in different areas, academia, tech, or whatever it is, mushroom foraging, and not losing that is going to be the most valuable asset.
I love that so much, Jane. Storytelling. Absolutely.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, again, we brought together people who are deeply embedded in communication storytelling here, but I really believe that we're at a pivotal moment where communication based, communicating with ourselves, communicating with these tools, and then also how we preserve our kind of systems of communication really matter more than ever. So I'm really, really privileged with Anita to be joined by such thoughtful leaders in the field who have added such a layer of the rethinking and thinking alongside of how we can be intentional with AI, how our work is getting restructured, reimagined at this moment. And I want to thank also all the learners that joined us today too, in participating and in thinking with us, and in also contributing and building knowledge about the experiences. We really appreciated your participation today as well. Matt, Cheryl, Britta, Chang, thank you so much for being with us today and for giving us time and sharing your thinking. We'll be following your work. In our mini syllabus, we have information about all our speakers, their LinkedIn information, as well as links to, again, some of the resources that was shared today. We cited a lot of the research also that they mentioned, so you can dive deeper after this conversation. But thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks now. Take care.
And before we conclude, I want to just do a big shout out also before I remind a kind of a few final things is I want to do a shout out to our class live streaming
Yes.
class, our program really, and they're there. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your
Hello.
amazing work. You've produced an extremely professional and as you see, engaged conversation that's so timely. As you see, all we really believe in applied learning, and thank you to Richard for leading this community and showing us how to build community around learning environments like this. We really appreciate your work, and we really appreciate also all our students. Thank you all so much, and enjoy your lunch as we transition out. And Anita, a couple bits. Our Miro board is, I think, still active,
Yes. It
and we'll
is
keep
definitely
it
still
active.
active. And as you said, we'll be sharing it after the event. So continue to propagate it, and it'll be a continuing learning tool.
Indeed, and we will have links to everything through our
Yes.
mini syllabus too, which if you haven't gotten it, we'll share in comments now again, but then also we'll share with you all also in the follow-up as well throughout. And then last but not least, Anita, we have a few reminders for our learners today. Again, this event was produced by University of Washington's for me, very fantastic. And as not just the director, but as a big fan of our community, I think we
Yes.
both are, Anita.
Absolutely.
What a wonderful community. Thank you to all our alums who joined, professionals who joined. It was wonderful to
Yes.
see you. And we're expanding our community at any given time. Again, the second round of final cycle for international applicants. And AI related themes and intentionality in future work is a core consideration of our program. So
That's
if
right.
you are at a moment where you're rethinking, we want to invite you to apply to our program, which is, again, applications are due April 1.
Yes.
Again, a quick reminder that also an AI course coming up in May, our short course on thinking about workflows in the AI space. So the short course is coming up from May 11th to June 28th, and this is a standalone course taught by our faculty. So if you want to dive deep, and if 3 hours wasn't enough, but you don't have time for a master's program, this is a good somewhere in between option to
That's
connect
right.
and learn from faculty, connect with other learners, and create together new workflows, creative workflows in consideration of what we discussed today. And Anita, I'll turn it over to you. We have some events coming up too.
Yes, we
So
do. And
yes,
no, thanks. Well, first of all, the Uncompete event coming up on March 6th, which I know you'll be a part of, in conversation with the wonderful author and thought leader Ruchika Malhotra. This is an event that is going to be looking at a terrific book. I think is it Ruchika's second book, second publication, I
third
believe, coming
actually.
up on the third. Oh, I'm so sorry. Third
Yes.
book. Look at her. She's prolific. And I should also note that these events are listed in the syllabus as well. So these slides are here for you visually right now, but the syllabus also includes these details with registration links. The QR codes here are on the screen as well for now. And then we're doing a terrific interactive film series that features both our alums and faculty short films. Impact Stories is the name. It's happening between the 20th and the 27th of March. And it's really terrific. We have some incredible storytellers in the video field in our midst, in our community. And so both of these events, you are more than welcome.
I think we have a few more events coming up too in our final slide. Yes, our
Yes,
final
go ahead
event.
again.
No, I'm just really excited about talking to Ruchika tomorrow. Again, those of you who are in Seattle, join us in person, either on Friday, in 2 days, not tomorrow. Come to
Yes.
campus, ask questions, learn with us. It will on Friday we have a series of book talks. First of which is, as Anita mentioned, with Ruchika Malhotra about her book Uncompete. And on April 3rd, again on campus, we're going to host Dr. Colin Fisher, a professor of University College London, who works on collaboration and teams. His book, The Collective Edge, is a book I assigned in my class in the fall, and we got connected, and we are so thrilled. It's a book that's already translated to 20 different languages and looks at what successful teams have in common and trying to shift us from a me mentality to a we mentality, and kind of really advocating for that collaborative thinking that's necessary for all organizations as they try to navigate challenges like AI, reimagine who they are. So I want to invite you all to on April 3rd to campus with Dr. Colin Fisher for our book talk. And last but not least, Anita, I want to remind everyone, of course, of the digital badge opportunity.
Yes.
This is a great opportunity for all learners to kind of dive deeper into it. Until March 20th, right? We have
That's
created some
correct.
reflection questions for our learners today to dive deep
And they'll be
into.
sent to them. So if you look for it in your inbox, I believe it'll be coming
Yes,
in the inbox, in the email that you registered for the event.
exactly. And then it's also already on the minute syllabus too. So we'll follow
Oh,
up with
terrific.
everyone. Exactly.
Perfect.
So I will have it on the comments of the recording too. You have till March 20th. So about 2
Yes.
weeks to maybe rewatch, reflect back, and submit those reflections to us. And you'll get an online badge from our program as a recognition of your learning, as always. So with that, we wrap up another Connects. Anita,
Another
thank you for so
connects.
much. Always wonderful to try to make sense of the world with you, and
Always.
with our
Thank you,
community
Etienne.
too. And thanks to again our wonderful, wonderful speakers. Who I leave today rich with knowledge. I have so
Yes.
much I'm thinking about, but again, we look forward to continuing thinking with you. Please reach out to us at comlead@uw.edu. Our website is also, and social media channels are also listed on the mini syllabus. And thank you for learning with us today.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.
Wow.